People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
This is Dave Tate with another edition of Table Talk. Today I am here with Yessica Martinez, Alycia Israel, and Julia Anto, and we're going to talk about, I don't know, anything. I have no idea. I don't have the questions. I haven't seen anything. So from there, we will just start with hello. How are you? And to make it real weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah, let's have the ladies introduce themselves. Maybe.
Yes.
Who wants to start?
I'll start.
You can introduce each other.
I like looking at Yessica.
How's that? Because you're all modest, so you can introduce each other.
Oh, that's very. I'll introduce Yessie because she's like my daughter.
I love you.
I know. She calls me mom. She literally calls me mom.
And every time we do a summer, I'm like, oh, in 1962 when she started training.
See?
1962. Just to make fun of her age.
It's terrible. So, anyways.
It's not really that bad.
No, it's not. I do turn 40 this year, but. So what I know about Yessie is I've known Yessie for probably, I don't know, it's been a while, probably about 2013-ish maybe.
Yeah.
Through social media, and then joining the team. Yessie has a well-versed background in strength sports. She's strongman, she's powerlifting, she dabbles in the off season doing who knows what, yoga and dancing and
photography
and model.
I don't model.
Oh, come on.
I
Yes,
do not model.
Kinda.
Yes, you do.
I just so happen to be in front of the camera.
Pose.
Actually, I don't. I'm like,
no, it's shots. You take cool shots.
yeah,
Very true.
However
she's in front and behind the camera,
Yes,
which
yeah.
her photography, she's picked up that. She dabbles in a lot of interesting things.
All things yes.
One thing, all things Yessie. And just quickly, one thing I love about her is that when she does get interested in something, she kind of goes into it head first and makes sure that she learns the craft, studies it, and does that thing really, really well.
That was really sweet.
Right.
Yeah, snaps for Yessie.
Okay.
Yeah, are you gonna go?
Wait, so how does this
I'll
work?
just-
Because
yeah.
You introduce her.
Okay, then I got you. I got
figure it
you.
out.
Okay.
Let's do
I'm
that.
just a bystander here.
Who's introducing Dave?
Nobody
Okay,
needs to.
I'll introduce Alycia. I mean, even though we're just getting to know each other, even though we've
We've had a lot of sleepovers in the
had
last
a lot
year.
of sleepovers.
A little closer to the mic, yes.
Oh, sorry. We've had a lot of sleepovers, but Alycia and I want to say in the beginning, we were, I guess we
More like acquaintances, I think.
Yeah, because we wouldn't communicate. We'd just be like, hey, what's
Hey,
up?
what's up?
You know, how are you?
And now she sleeps over my house. all
And
the
now
time.
I sleep over her house. And we're actually like, whatever, breaking down whatever walls we had and kind of just like trying to get to know each other.
Oh, we have some deep talks.
And we do have some deep talks. And what I know about her is, or at least what she tells me, is that she's OCD. She's a hard worker. She's always working, which is true. I do see her always on a laptop.
all the time.
All the time. She's very clean. She lets...
You're welcome. I know when you're staying, I'm going to clean the house, get ready. I groom the dogs. They're ready for you.
I love her dogs. It's always fun sleeping over because I love dogs. I want to say she's just very open to her own shit, just because like she's just like, oh, I don't know. She like with me, I'm like more secretive with like the behind the scenes of what you don't see as like ladylike per se, and she's just like she just doesn't give a fuck, and I was like, okay, all right, I like this chick.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
that's
Swearing.
good.
Just kidding.
Oh, I was about to say,
let's do
God,
that.
We're in
sorry.
trouble.
But I know she competes and she has a background of I guess like family history with things that don't come easy to you, and you definitely break through barriers, and I see that, and I think you've progressed a lot over the years as far as your confidence and your approach with everything, and I feel like you know more of who you are as a person for sure. I've seen that contrast since I've met you. So
I feel like this is walking into the girls' bathroom. When you're at a show or an event and you walk in the girls' bathroom and all the girls are like, you look great. Fuck yeah, you look awesome. That's what I feel like right now. This is what this is.
Yeah, sure.
I just walked into the girls' bathroom. Thanks.
David doesn't know what that's like. He's like,
You don't know until you walk into a girl's bathroom and everyone's like, your hair looks
how
beautiful.
is
guys
Guys'
don't walk. How is
Well,
it?
what are you talking about particular? Because I did used to work as a trainer in a Gen Pop Club. So when you walk in the guy's bathroom and they got the gray nutsack,
Like old
hanging
man
down, it's
standing
just-
around naked kind of a
It's
thing.
gross as fuck.
Is it? Do you stare or do you look away? Or is it kind
I
of like
don't look. It's just, no, I'm not doing this. But the locker room attendants had good stories. So that was fun to talk because you didn't really see it. You just heard it. Like, so-and-so was blow drying his dick hair. Like, what? Like with a blow dryer? Like,
Meet that volume.
Yep.
full heat?
Yep. So that's what goes on. Yeah.
Full
Full heat. I guess. I don't
It's
know.
different. It's cold and heat. And blow
I don't know.
All right. Anyways, who's
Maybe
introduced?
somebody will ask a
Yes.
question.
All right, I got Julia. So me and Julia, we go back. I think I met you before I was on the team. So I used to work at Ohio State for 7 years, and that's how Julia and I met because I had Julia come and speak for me at an event. And ever since then, like we've known each other. She's spoken. Gosh, how many times you do Buckeye
It's
Barbells
at least
for me?
4.
Yeah, she was my guest speaker for Buckeye Barbells, women's only strength training program I created at Ohio State for years, and she was like my number one go-to for speaking. So that's how we definitely got to know each other. But Julia is like the godmother of strength training and powerlifting and physique, competing, and I feel like you just do everything. Like you're kind of the jack of all trades, but not just the jack. You're just awesome at all of them.
Yeah.
So that's how I view Julia. She's kind of like someone I look up to because, you're one of the first, and, weren't you the first female on elitefts in general or second? Like one of the first?
One of the first, yeah.
Yeah. So when I was, looking at elitefts' website back when I was in college, I'm like, oh, Julia, like woman crush hard.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're, coming to speak for me at events at Ohio State, and then I'm a part of the team. So I'm like, wow, full circle, man.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I've known all of you for longer than I care to admit, and you would probably not like me to say. But I can say for those listening, I just kind of go around in no specific order. Julia I met when she was, probably before you even hired as a strength coach.
It was in
So
2001 at one of your
was
seminars, yeah.
Still in school, graduating from school.
Mm-hmm.
And when people ask me, who's the most qualified strength coach and so forth, who's got the most experience, it's her, bar none. She's the only person that has worked pretty much all sectors of the strength and conditioning field, from the collegiate sector, 3 different jobs, I believe, 2 or 3, and then the private sector, the Parisis, and then your own private sector.
Own,
so
yeah.
there's not a job that you haven't done. And then when you look at powerlifting, physique, the bodybuilding sector is covered as well. So it's kind of when you start looking at females in this industry, I don't want to say you broke ceilings, but you had to fight a lot of fights that
20 years ago, yeah.
these guys don't have to fight.
Yeah, I'm gonna fight no more.
Yeah,
Thanks.
So it's, that's a good thing, and because of that, you probably didn't advance to the places that you should have advanced to, but you still have the knowledge.
That's a story for
and
another day.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
for
is.
sure,
It is
for
a story
sure.
for another
Yeah,
day.
absolutely.
Alycia, the same thing. I believe you were at Ohio State working. Not,
Yeah, when I met you.
Yeah, when we met, and I don't want to say you wanted. I don't want to say you wanted out of it, but you saw bigger things for yourself way before it happened, and had the persistence to keep sticking to that for a long period of time. I don't think people know how long it really takes to be able to get to where actually you all are. You came up and didn't know if you want to be a strongman, powerlifting, and what it really was. And I think we've talked before. I don't know if we've talked on camera. I'm not only saying on the podcast, where we were going back and forth about sponsorship, but didn't have the elite total, which I don't think people really understand, that if you're going to be sponsored to come on the team in any lifting sense, you have to have an elite total. Fucking close. Her and Jen are kind of goes back and forth because it's almost the same story, but not really.
No,
They're
she's
completely two different people. Completely two different people. But the persistence in trying to get that is really the reason why she came on from that standpoint. And then as a whole, with all 3 of you, you kind of see what people can become before they actually get there. And then you got to kind of be patient, kind of let them cut their own way, and losing my voice. But you're all doing it. you're all becoming who you've really meant to be, which is great to see. And I think that those lessons from getting from step A to where you are now, there's a lot of adversity, which I don't think people understand the extent of the adversity. I do, because I've seen it. Not all of it, because you don't share everything with me, but enough of it to know this is not an easy path for anybody, especially you guys. And that's where I think the real value can come from out of this podcast, is not really discussing so much of where you are now or what you do for people now, but the journey on how you got there, so other people realize it's not always what you see. It's kind of like a firework display. Like, everybody wants to talk about the grand finale, right? Oh my God, that was great. That's what everybody sees. That's what everybody remembers, is that grand finale. But they don't pay attention that much to all the single fireworks that went off beforehand. And they sure as fuck don't pay attention to how long it took to set it up.
For sure.
Right.
And they definitely don't know how long it took to plan it out. And they certainly don't know how much money it costs to be able to get there. So all they really see is that final 5%, which is this spectacular thing.
Which is really
cool.
social media.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's
Social
what
media.
it does. It highlights that, but kind of disguises all that, especially the planning stuff. Like, I don't do fireworks, so I don't know fucking shit about it, right? So I'm just kind of guessing. But I seriously doubt when they do them in downtown Columbus, big, whatever the hell it's called, gala fire, what the hell, 4th of July.
It's red, white, and boom.
Red, white, and boom. When they do that, they probably start planning for it a year out.
Yeah.
I would say a year in advance.
At
for
least
sure.
a year out. And we don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is, but I understand it's more intensive than the
We
grand
think.
finale.
Just showing up and
Yes, but today's world, too many people see that grand finale like, that's what I want to do. And it's like, oh, okay, that's where you want to aspire. And a lot of times the grand finale isn't the end of the road anyhow.
Oh, no.
That's just, you think that was a grand finale, but you don't realize that that's actually just part of the show, that the bigger one's louder down the line. So with that said, we'll go to questions, I suppose, and just get this rolling.
Unless there's anything else you ladies want to add.
Not yet.
No.
No, well, I guess
We'll
we'll
just
see.
go with the flow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. First question is going to be internally from our staff here. How has your perspective on strength training changed since the beginning of your involvement in the lifting world? So whoever wants to start that.
Is your mic working?
Should be.
All right, so I don't have to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, go.
Man, how has the perception changed? I started actually strength training in high school. I was like 15 years old when I first got into the weight room in high school with a track coach, and super basic back then. It was the bigger, faster, stronger program. I mean, that's really all we knew. I think that my perceptions changed in that the older you get and the longer you're in this, you start to take notice of every aspect of training, and not just the sets, the reps, the weight, the things that the specifics that everybody thinks strength training really is. And you start to, now you're talking about different types of programming. What pieces can I pull from 531? What can I pull from conjugate? What can I
Right.
pull from block? What can I pull? And then you start to formulate either what works for you, because now you are your own self-experiment. And for us, it's Alycia and I, and even you a little bit, clients, how can I now formulate this into working for other people? So you start to develop all of these aspects that are coming together, where at first you were kind of like, okay, it's 3 sets of 10,
Right.
and you do a double leg exercise, then a single leg exercise, and it's so simple at first, and then you start to realize that there's so much more out there, that it all starts coming together. And that's just the training aspect. Now you're not even talking nutrition and recovery and, sleep and hormones, and like, all of a sudden, it's just the older you get, and we say it a million times, the more you
dumber you
realize.
get.
Yeah, you don't know anything.
Yes, you don't know. There's so much.
No,
It's
yeah.
crazy. So
And it's more fun. It's more
it truly
creative.
does. It really does.
It's not just a structure of 3 sets of 10 is for hypertrophy. It's just you can mix and match a million different ways. So the more schooled you get, the more you almost go back to the basics of it's not just as simple. It's not as simple. It can be really intricate and really cool and different for everybody. And I think that's that's what I've learned too. And not even just the strength part of it, but when I first started, I was like, oh, just lift weights, get stronger. But then you realize over time, like, it has a whole different mindset perspective shift.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, from a confidence perspective, especially for women, like hardcore, you know, any female that I've ever trained, especially through Buckeye Barbells when I was at Ohio State, we survey them, because obviously that's what you do at a university. You survey everything, you know, from start to finish. You ask them questions of their confidence, and almost 100% of the time, it's night and day difference of, it's not even just being confident in the gym, but now I'm confident in my career. I'm more confident in relationships. I have, you know, whatever it is I've built, it's because I've conquered goals and did things in the gym I didn't think I could do before. So that to me is kind of, I didn't think that would come with it, and it did.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me, yes, it's like you realize how much more complicated it is, and you get curious and you want to find out like the history. I guess like the easiest example is like if you see someone doing something wrong as far as like technique or anything, you can't just go up to them and fix it anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, what were your past injuries? Did you have any injuries? Like anything like that. So, but also, even though it does get a lot more complicated, in my journey, I learned that going back to the basics and simplifying everything also is a go-to, and it's easy. You know, so I think with so much information out there, it can get a little overwhelming.
For sure.
And it's like, okay, well, what works? Stick with it for as long as you can.
And who does it apply to?
Exactly.
You know, the complicated versus the simple. Like,
exactly.
You train the person, not, you know, it depends on them. For sure, because I have clients have really complicated programs because they're a more advanced athlete versus someone who just wants to get in the gym. It's going to look completely different.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, we can go to another one. What kind of resistance have you guys encountered in relation to your lifting involvement?
Resistance, no pun intended.
Yeah.
In what way?
Yeah,
That's very general.
That is the whole question. We can go to something different.
No. What was it? What is the resistance from? What was the?
What kind of resistance have you encountered in relation to your lifting involvement? Has there been any setbacks? or anything
We'll
that's,
just take this and say sticking points. You know, so you're competing as a powerlifter. So let's go back. You're competing as a powerlifter. Everything's going pretty smooth because it does when you're starting out, right? Your first big obstacle. What was it?
I would say, oh my gosh, for me back then when I was first starting off, it was bench. I mean, if we're going to be general and a broad in that aspect, it was bench, and it was locking out. It was locking out a heavy weight. And for those that don't know, I started off in more of a multiply powerlifting, because that's really kind of all that was around back then. In 1962, and so for me, that's what it was.
What did you try that didn't work? To fix a lockout?
Man, these are great questions, because I think what's interesting from where I am now is when I look back to 18 years ago when I was just starting multiply powerlifting, I almost didn't even know to look for things that weren't working. Like new lifters, that's something that they just think if they follow what somebody else does, or this is what's supposed to be done, they don't look for, wow, front squats seem to really make my squat better, or they don't seem to be they have a harder time making those correlations. For me, I had to handle a heavy load, whether that was higher board presses, 3-4 board stuff. So it's just hammering my lockout, because I had to have 300 pounds in my hands. My body had to feel that. So I knew what worked. In thinking back that many years ago, it's hard to remember what didn't work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm more cognizant of it now. But yeah, I would say the overall, for me, that kind of stuff, the sticking point of being able to handle that load and being able to lock it out multiple times before getting to a competition.
Okay, let's scoot forward and get into the physique. I think you started in figure first, right?
I did one figure show,
then
but then physique, yeah.
The first time you really had to diet, what was the adversity there? What was what was that moment?
I would say it was being at family gatherings and you're the person eating out of a Tupperware container. I don't know how many times I would be running kids around to various activities and have to eat something cold. I would have chicken and rice, and it's cold, and it's time to eat because I have 3 more meals I have to fit in before the night's over. And you just... That was tough, right? Mother's Day rolled around. I would go to the kids' preschool, and it's like they're passing out cookies to all the moms, and here I am, and my son's like, "Are you gonna eat your cookie, Mom?" And I'm like, "I'll take it home for later." So and it's not that the food was the thing. Obviously, it was more important that I was just there celebrating Mother's Day with him. But you realize, kind of stinks.
That's not how normal life is.
Yeah, no. Normally I would just be like, sure, cookie, yeah. But so I think those were the challenging parts at first. And then you just...
Did you feel like because you weren't getting the full experience of being there because you couldn't have... Not like that?
No, not at all. And I don't know if it was because having had a lot of powerlifting experience, as you guys know, your brain just does what you're supposed to do. You just turn into I call it robot mode.
Yeah.
You just do what you're supposed to do. There's no thought. There's no really woe is me. I'm missing out on all this fun because
it's just what you have to do.
I was there and we did the Mother's Day craft and we still had fun. And he doesn't remember that I didn't eat the cookie. Right. So, yeah.
He just remembers that you were there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. So let's go your first, it was figure first, right?
I did figure first.
Figure first. So let's go training wise. So going from your normal
it was normal. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Training type thing
to
figure
in.
training. So what was the change in the shift that you had to do there that maybe you weren't so cool? You didn't know if it was the right path.
The biggest pansy in my first show. I will be the first to admit it was such a slap in my face of comfort zone issues. So I competed my first show when I was in grad school. It was 2011. And, you think oh, yeah, I want to do that. Those girls look great. I'm going to do it and be strong and whatever. And then you actually do it and you're like, oh, fuck. This is what training hard means. I remember I joined a gym where the owner of the gym coached girls and we would all train together in a group, which was pretty cool. Definitely wouldn't have done nearly as well if I had to do it on my own. But anyway, so we were with the group. And I remember back then I was like, I'm going to shoulder press 15 pounds. This is sets of 12. This is great. And then she was warm up set and she handed me 25s. And I was like, I end with these. What? And so I did it and she was like, okay, go to 30s. And she's spotting me. I'm dying. And she's like, okay, this is figure training. This is heavy. This is what heavy is. This is what straining is, bracing your core. Your eyeballs feel like they're going to fall, bust out of your face. That's what this is. Welcome.
What was first for you? Was it strongman or strong woman? Well, what are they? Strong woman.
Just do strongman.
Strongman. I don't know what the fuck.
History.
To me, I say strongman.
I say strongman. I don't.
Yeah, whatever. Was it that or was it powerlifting first?
I want to say it was powerlifting because for me it was a little bit different. For them, maybe it was a little physical. For me, it was mental, and that's what we go back to. It took me a while to get my elite total. Mm-hmm. I want to say the reason why it took me a while is because I think I did all the amateur fuck ups in my first couple of meets. So I think it's and we talk about it often. It's letting go of ego, and so in my first meet I was unprepared. Okay, well. Then the ego is in your head and it's you have to do well. So the next couple, I forgot which meet. I don't know if it was the following one or the third one, but I missed my first attempt in squat. Who does that? So then I was oh, okay, but I've done it in the gym, so I'm just going to go up and weight. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously an amateur move. You don't go up and weight if you don't get it, So it's figuring those things out. And I was actually with Tony Ramos from Westside. Mm-hmm. And I remember him saying, open up with your attempts as if you had the shittiest day in the gym. Mm-hmm. And that's what you go off of. And I was like, oh, okay, you're not supposed to go 120% at a gym. You start humbly, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's those little mistakes that I learned real quick. And so it's my mind shifted and it's okay, be humble and obviously work hard in the gym and it's going to show obviously, hopefully in the platform if everything comes together, but it's okay. I've done this before, it's just repetition, getting everything, put together. And, you know, you just got to get the first rep in, and that's it. Like, don't put that much pressure, don't overthink it, and you've done it before plenty of times. It's just another day at the gym. And I think that it's just more mental for me for this journey, because, and I still struggle with it. I think most people do, because we know if we can't get something, but we know we've worked hard, it's just all in the mind, you know? So once I kind of put all that together and I got my elite total, I was like, oh, I can actually do this. You know what I mean? So for me, that's what it was.
For those listening, what I typically will tell people is take whatever your last warm-up is,
Right.
and do it on the platform.
Right.
You know, people are, oh, I can't do that. That's way off. Well,
They
it's
overestimate.
an
They
opener,
overestimate.
right? So the takeaway that I'm kind of taking from all this is nobody was comfortable during their first competition.
Nope.
Powerlifting, figure, whatever it is. Nobody's A, comfortable. Nobody, B, is prepared. You know, so they don't think either. So those people who are putting off competing should probably understand that everybody sitting here wasn't prepared and they weren't comfortable for their first competition. You just have to do it. Get your numbers or placing or whatever it is. It's your base. You know, establish your baseline, and then from there, get better.
Yep.
And then that's your new foundation, and work upon that.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, the second one's more stressful than the first, because the
for
second
sure.
one you got to beat whatever you did before. But it's also way more motivating, because now you got to mark.
Right.
Where before it's just that.
You're like,
It's like
shooting
smoke.
in the
It's
dark.
like fuck.
Yeah. It's vague.
There was a live one that came in. I don't know if you guys can hear me over there.
Kind of.
This was for you, Yessica. What strongman lifts do you feel like help powerlifting the most that you've seen?
From my personal experience, just from, because when I was training for strongman for, you know, a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I went straight back to powerlifting, my bench skyrocketed. And the only thing I can really give credit to is a lot of overhead pressing, a lot of close grip stuff, and that transferred over. So I want to say pushing myself, obviously getting stronger in those implements that I'm doing in those competitions, and there's 9 times out of 10 there's going to be an overhead press in a strongman competition. So I mean, I'm working at those things every week. It's not like just an accessory, it's an actual like priority. It's a main movement in my training. So it carried over to powerlifting, I would say.
Do you think there was any specific overhead press that, or just in general? And would you say it was more like the heavy, like single reps?
I would
or
say
is it like the AMRAPs in a minute or something?
I would say it's the heavy, the strain, and working on that lockout and like pushing through that hard, you know, lift that
would carry over more
that
to
carried
the bench,
over, because it's like with bench, it, like you said, you had issues with lockout, and that's the one thing that we work on for strongman implements, whether that's like overhead pin presses,
right?
You know, you're working on lockout and stuff like that. So I would say that had the biggest carryover to powerlifting. And as well, there's no sumo either in strongman,
right?
So everything's conventional. So that's when it's like, oh crap, like I'm only doing conventional deadlifts right now. So obviously I'm saving the hips, but I'm building up my back and everything. So that has a huge carryover too.
I was just going to say, eventually down the road, when you come back to powerlifting, you're going to see that benefit somewhere,
right,
in your.
And I think it's, if you really look at it in just a general overview, it's like I'm doing things I wasn't doing in powerlifting.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you have an end goal with powerlifting, but you also have an end goal with strongman, and I'm sure there's like somewhat of an overplay, you know? So
Well, and like we talk about with powerlifting is that when you're not training for a meet, what are you doing in the off season? You're doing things that are not powerlifting specific.
Right.
So you're doing your opposite stance deadlift. You're doing overhead pressing. So it's like
you're doing conditioning. I don't need
Correct.
conditioning to be in powerlifting per se, but
right, I know, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm pushing it a little bit further in my off season, because I mean, at the end of the day, I am an athlete. Like I want to be an athlete. I want to be good at all things, not just one thing.
Right.
You know. Mm-hmm. So I would say that those had the biggest carryovers.
Interesting.
All right, just in time. What's something you guys wish more people understood about lifting?
Oh.
I actually
Maybe
had a
something that gets
conversation
misconstrued.
with Dave Kirchin about this.
Okay.
Just because And I think Julie and I kind of spoke about this too. I think the misconception of lifting is it's actually not about lifting. You know, it's yes, you're getting stronger, but at the end of the day, it's finding out who you are and who you meet and those connections that you create. Obviously last year I didn't perform as well as I did, and I was very down on myself, and Dave Kirchner reached out to me, and he's like, you don't think it's still about numbers, do you? And I was just like, yes. Right. I mean, you don't want to do bad in a meet, but I understand
the bigger picture.
The bigger picture of it. And this is only going to make me smarter and stronger mentally, physically, whatever you want to take it as, for the next steps. You learn through your failures. That's just what it is. And it's not all about PRs, and it's not all about successes and what you post on, you know. That's why I think with us, it's like we post success movements. Like, it's not exciting, but it's something to take away from, you know what I mean? Or, you know, we talk about, it's a bad day mentally. You know, people need to talk about the behind the scenes more often than what, you know, the celebrations
it's just flashy,
are.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not flashy. It's not, it's emotional, but it's also really, really fun. And I think you see that. I mean, look what we're doing right now through this, you know? So
yeah, it's for everyone.
It's for everyone.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think the general people think that us lifters are, you know, we're, you know, the dumb meathead kind of concept, when there are some very, very, very smart individuals in this industry.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And we're seeing them more and more now because of social media. But, you know, to kind of piggyback off of what Yessi said, is that it's we've all taken a piece of lifting. Now, not every person in the world is going to, and I always say, like, some people love sitting on the couch and crocheting. Some people love playing piano. Some people love, so not everybody's going to fall in love with lifting. The one thing I love about our industry is that whether you end up as a power lifter or not, strength training and lifting ends up in some capacity being beneficial for your health. And so when you look at it from that standpoint and living a healthy life, and I'm sure we'll talk about, right, issues and health issues that people deal with all the time, but there's something we are given one body, and when you don't move it, and when you don't take care of it, and when you know, I mean, on the opposite end of the spectrum as lifters, we push a little too far, but for the general person, for the 98% of this population that do not powerlift or even strength train seriously, like, there is benefit. There are extreme health benefits to this and what we do. You don't have to take it to the extreme to get something
you don't have to be an
out of
athlete
it.
To get in the gym.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So people get scared of it and they think it's for a certain select few. And like, no, it's beneficial for literally every human on this earth. Kid, like adult, doesn't really matter who you are. Like,
and like you said, you find
crossover.
What capacity it is for that person, and that might be, you know, circuit stuff. It might be med ball stuff. It might be kettlebells. It might be, you know, combining some, you know, yoga with some, like,
whatever.
It doesn't have to be traditional, you know, weight training.
Right.
And that's missed often. So
For me, it's a tough question to answer, because in my mind, there's two demographics, right? There's the athlete, the competitor is competing. And in my opinion, you don't want to leave the sport asking what if. Right. So you can be a recreational competitor. That's fine, as long as you know that's what it is, and you're cool with placing third, fifth, or not qualifying for a bigger competition. You got to be cool with that. You can't be that person and then be pissed that you're not the best.
Winning, right.
You just can't do that. But if you are going to be the person that says, I want to try to be the best and push my body to the absolute limit, well, then you got to understand there's going to be destruction that comes with that, and there's sacrifice that comes with that. It's real easy to say and pretend that's the person that you want to be, but when you go to actually execute on it, it's not the same thing. It's completely different. Now on the other side, so competitors gone, right? The other side, just people that want to exercise and lift weights for health. Don't do the stupid shit. Right. You know, understand that you want to try to do this until you're 80 years old.
It's supposed to make you healthier, not right.
Yes, because the competitor might not be able to do it when they're 60, 70 years old, because they made that deal with the devil a long time ago. If you don't have any plans to compete, or you're going to be the recreational competitor, don't make that deal. It's then you're going to look back and say, what the fuck did I do that? You're not going to say, what if, like the guy who competed at the highest level. They're going to say, what, I wish I would have done this, or this. But they can justify it in their head, my head, you know, because they can say, look, I competed, this is what I want to do. I couldn't justify it if I wasn't competing. Like, okay, I'm fucked
Right.
up, can't do all this because I just wanted to train really hard. The fuck is that? So, you know what I'm saying? So to explain this to the competitor that thinks they're serious, but they're not, that's one conversation. To explain it to the other side of the coin, that's a whole nother conversation. And I've had these conversations in the little train your ass off thing that I did, because one group is that, where it's like, okay, you have to realize you need to push way harder and to sacrifice way more. If this is really where, so the first conversation is, this really what you want to do? Let me tell you about the real world here. You know, is this what you want to do? And if yes, okay, then you got to change it. Now, on the other side, there was a group that, no, they just wanted to train hard, get stronger. Okay, you don't have to do all these other things because it's not worth it. You're going to look back and say, that was dumb.
Now I can't do any of it because
Yeah,
I'm broken.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
This is a good one. Describe a lifting or coaching related concept or idea that you were totally opposed to at one point and now are less opposed to, or actually now support it, and why that change occurred. If there's anything that applies to you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Everything.
Wait,
There's so
lifting?
much. I wrote a article on this. It was Alicia's
lifting.
list
I
of
used to be
take backs.
multiply, and now it's,
Yeah.
you know.
Gosh,
But
I
yeah.
need to get the article out and get my phone.
Grab it.
My take
What's
backs.
the name of the article?
It's Alicia's list of take backs.
You want me to pull it up for you?
If you want to, I don't remember what I wrote. I'm kind of interested
Does
now.
it have to be lifting related?
Not if you have something else.
I mean, for me, it was yoga.
Oh, yeah.
You were against it.
I was
now
against
it's-
yoga. I was
yeah,
like, this is for hippie
sure.
shit. This is for
Oh,
hippie.
yeah.
Like, what the fuck are these people?
I think for a lot of lifters,
hummening?
it's something like that related, whether that's stretching or mobility or something that has some type of longevity or recovery benefit to it.
Yeah.
Because we're like, we don't need that. I don't have time to do that.
This is when, I mean, this is before I moved to like Ohio, Pittsburgh, whatever. And I was like, yoga, whatever. Like, that's so fucking stupid. They're singing humana, humana, humana.
And now you're doing poses on the bridge.
Yeah. And so actually what changed my mind is I got hired by Lululemon, and obviously they're big advocates for that kind of stuff. And I still had to break through layers once I started yoga, because
Really?
they do an in the end, and I'm like, this is fucking stupid. And I was just like, and you know me, I'm like, why can't I just want to do this? Why can't I just be open to this experience?
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I need to be full
You were
on.
fighting it.
Yeah, I was fighting it. So, you know, I started doing yoga. I'm like, holy crap, this is actually really hard, especially mentally, because I want to say the hardest classes that I take are more like restorative, because they're so simple. So you're not distracted with inversions or anything like that. Like, you know, we're distracted a lot with lifting, but this is the mental aspect that I work on a lot is can you
Focus.
sit in your own stillness? You know, let me put
5
the
minutes,
verbiage out
right,
there.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's like, with me, it's like, okay, like my mind's running. It's like, okay, I'm here. Like, let me be present. I keep trying to bring myself back every time I do like a simple class like that. And then one day, you know, all right, class, let's end with an let's end with 3 And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So I just did it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's actually really empowering. So it's like, now I'm like full on yogi. I do it all the time. And it just breaks through barriers, and it lets go of, like, it's just letting it go. Like,
you had to be
of the
open-minded
idea.
to it.
You just
Right.
have
Had
to be
to- yeah.
open-minded to it.
Right.
And it's funny. I went on a retreat, which is like a full paid thing that Lululemon does for like their full-time employees. And I went on this yoga retreat. And for people that are not open-minded, it is not for you. Like the activities that we had to do, we had to pretend there was like a fire going on and react to it. And it's like we had to like go through these like it's like really
Like
out of your-
acting?
yeah, like,
Oh, wow.
oh my God, like, you know, there's blueberries coming out of the wall and stuff like that. And you had to like make up these storylines and like open up your imagination. It was like very kid-like, and I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I did, because it was weird and out of my comfort zone. But I want to say, like, with yoga, it's like, look where I was against it, and it's brought so much to my life, you know? So I would have to say that's the biggest one.
I think speaking in absolutes, when you're young and you start learning, you say everything. There's no gray area, you know.
Yeah.
It's black and white.
Always or nothing.
The more
never.
I learn, and as I was like scrolling through my take back list, I was like, all of these that I can just ramble them off, but really all of it is just I don't speak in absolutes anymore. You know, I can justify. I mean, I used to hate keto. back in the day, keto's stupid for everything. Still not a big fan, but there's some people who actually thrive off that.
Yeah.
And it could be a certain period of time, and maybe they transition to something else. And there are things I completely bashed back in the day. But now when someone asks me a question like, what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? What are your thoughts on tracking macro? I'm always like, well, it depends on the context. And it turns into this big thing versus just in the past. When I started, I would have been like, intermittent fasting is stupid or intermittent fasting is great. Like I just say, well, who's the person? What's their environment?
Right.
What's their lifestyle? What are their goals? Like it's this whole slew of like backup questions, and people are like, wait, what? And I'm like, well, truly, I mean, it's context dependent.
Yeah, for sure.
Dave, what about you?
I think that a lot of this is necessary throughout your learning process if you're going to try to strive to hit some level of mastery, because I kind of look at them as stopgaps. So you're going to form your own bias. I had a bias when I graduated high school. I knew all the Weider principles. I knew fucking everything about training and got a job as a personal trainer because of it. When you develop that bias and you're very rigid on it, if you continue to keep learning, the only thing you're going to be able to do is to go deeper. So you're going to look for things that justify your bias.
Right.
So all the research you're looking at, you're not looking at anything that contradicts your bias, but you're looking at everything that supports it. Band training, speed training, whatever it's going to be. You're looking at all those things, and then you can regurgitate it. But at the same time, you're increasing your knowledge base on that. And over a period of time, the longer you stay, you're going to realize, ooh, shit, this is my bias. Then you start moving down the road a little more, and you form another one. And then you go deep on that. Then you form it. And then after 20, 30 years or 2 decades, whatever, say 2 decades, then you realize, fuck, everything kind of works.
Right.
Because you see it.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can get to that point without having those stopgaps. The issue are the people that hit the stopgap and then never proceed forward.
Very true. Yep.
So there is a certain degree of closed-minded that I think has to be there. But if you think back of those people that were open-minded the whole time, they don't know a fucking thing. They don't know anything.
Well, they don't know how to put it together.
Yes.
They see pieces, but they don't know how to construct it to make sense for an individual or themselves.
Well, if they're too open-minded, they're just going to grab anything that comes their
right.
way.
So they don't know how to put
Yeah.
context.
There's no skepticism to go, wait,
They don't have a
why
bullshit
does
detector.
intermittent fasting might work?
Right.
What's the basis behind that? And like you said, then they dig.
And you'll have that absolute bias, and it'll be strong for a while. We all, everybody has it, right? Hopefully you're going to lose it by the time you're 30. Hopefully, it'll kind of go away. But you can only be proven wrong so many times. You know what I'm saying? You can only read so much research that contradicts what your bias is to realize, fuck, maybe I'm a little off, or maybe there's more than one way to do this.
Right.
And then it's like, oh shit, there's more than one way. Can I market that? Because now it becomes a big issue if you're in the industry and you're tied to that bias. Because
Right.
And a lot of people, I don't want to mention names, but a lot of people get stuck to that, and they have no room to be able to wiggle out of it.
Because they're that person.
They're known for that.
Yeah. So they'll be good working with a small percentage of people. They're not going to be good working for everybody.
Right.
Because they're not going to be able to say, okay, the solution to this issue is shit I don't even agree with, but I know it.
They don't want to admit.
And I can implement it because the most important thing should be the results of the person that you're trying to help, not your bias.
Right.
Sometimes you got to set it aside to get them to move forward. So I think it's necessary to a point as long as it doesn't stick forever.
Right.
Because when it sticks forever, they just become very fucking annoying people. They're already annoying. The same way I was annoying everybody. They're already annoying when they're speaking in absolutes because nothing is in absolutes.
Well, what was that quote? The ability to change your mind it's a sign of higher intelligence.
Yes.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's like admitting you're wrong.
Right. It's admitting you're wrong and then, getting better.
That time, I forgot which seminar, or Dr. Connect, is that his name?
Ken, yeah.
Ken. When I think the biggest takeaway from that was he wrote a book. I don't know if you remember this. He said he wrote a book about something, and 10 years later, he's like,
totally wrong.
my book is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen someone in that. I mean, he's freaking smart. Like, he's he's good at his craft and whatnot. But when I saw him, I observed him the whole time.
And not only
This is
to
kinda
say
creepy.
that, but to say it publicly, like
Publicly.
Right.
that takes a lot.
Like, hey, I was
yeah.
wrong. And even when Dave was talking, he was in the back writing down notes, and I was like, this is like just a great example. I was observing him the whole time, especially someone who you think knows everything, you know.
Right, we think, yeah.
You can learn from everybody.
You can learn from
You can learn
everybody.
from beginners. I mean, you learn from your clients, right?
Exactly.
You learn from everybody. You can't shut people down because you're losing an opportunity.
Right.
And the longer you're in this, the worse you get at helping beginners. Because the people that start seeking you out are no longer beginners. And then you have to show somebody how to bench for the first time. You're like,
What?
fuck, can somebody come over here?
What?
I'm too concerned with how they're breathing and shit.
Can
They
you
just
fix their
need to
feet for me?
stay
'Cause I
tight, you know?
can't- yeah.
They just need
Right,
to not
that's the
move.
last thing they need to be worried about,
Or a
yeah.
plank. Like, fuck, can somebody come over here and teach them a plank? 'Cause I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just kicking them.
Alycia, is there anything you wanted to add with that article?
Oh, I can pull a specific one. Oh, shoot. It locked.
Oh, let me come over.
Face ID. I don't think my face is going to open your phone. I'll pull one off of there. These are good ones. All right. Let me creep. I got some life ones in here. Man. Here's the first one. Okay, this one's good. So this is my list of take-backs, so things I used to believe. So one was, this is referring to bodybuilding, so a slow reverse diet out of contest prep is necessary for metabolic and hormone health. So basically, when I first got into it, I thought, when you reverse diet out of a show, it has to be super, super slow, almost identical to how you dieted, so you don't gain any body fat and you stay really lean. And that now is almost the opposite of what you want. I mean, granted, you have to look at the individual, but you want their hormones to bounce back as fast as possible. You don't want to keep them in a deficit because it's a range. So if someone's eating 1,200 calories, the week before their show, and you're trying to reverse them, you don't want to be like, okay, let's eat 13. Like, they're still in a deficit. That's the range, It's not like they're only in a deficit at 1,200 calories, and anything above that is a maintenance or surplus. It's a range. So you want to get them out of a deficit. So you have to get at least a couple hundred in there, and that's not necessarily slow, especially for a female. Men are maybe a little bit different, but, you want to get their hormones optimized as fast as possible, while obviously not letting them go out of control in terms of body fat percentage. But it's hard mentally when you have a female who's used to being peeled to then saying, okay, guess what? You're going to have to put on 20 pounds of body fat probably in the next year. Like, realistically, for most women, you're not going to stay very close to stage weight at all.
No.
So that was a huge thing for me. I thought you would just have to stay as close as possible. You only have to be 5 to 10 pounds over stage weight. I'm like, hell no. I'm a 30, 35 pound over my stage weight, and that's where I'm comfortable. Every woman's different, but I need to get my food up as fast as possible because my hormones are tanked. Everything's down-regulated. So the longer it stays there, the more adaptation is going to occur, which means...
The longer it's going to take you to
The longer it's going to take to actually get back to normal. So what's the point of making it go slower? And also, too, you're typically in a prime state for when you add that food back in. You typically have a metabolic response and you feed through it. I got leaner after my show.
I was going to say, you actually end up leaner for those
You get
first 2
leaner.
weeks.
And so take advantage of that and, get food back in. And so that's not going to hurt you. So I feel like the old school slow mentality, to me, it's very individual, but I personally like to push them a little bit now. As long as mentally they're not going to lose it or they're going to eat less without telling me. But I like to push them just because, especially for women, you do not need your hormones down-regulated any more than they already are. Yeah. So just get them out of it. So that's definitely one.
Good one.
I know when Christian and Julia were here last, Christian had mentioned asking more questions is a good thing that beginners can do, and personal trainers and people of that nature. So this question was, what is the question you wish people would ask you, or what is the question you wish more people would ask?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Wow. What is the question?
These are deep.
I know.
I
feel
love
needed
deep
to prep
questions.
that. What is the question you wish more people would ask?
What's the best training program that, for me, not just in general, but what do I need to do to optimize myself? I feel like everyone's always looking for the best program, but really, you need to find what's best for you, and that takes patience and time and, going through things and, practicing essentially, but I feel like everyone's like looking for the new thing without even thinking about what's actually right for them. They just want the new shiny object. I feel like asking better questions about what actually is going to help you versus what the new shiny thing is, like what the cool new training program is, the cool new fad diet. How about let's actually look at what you need?
Because that's funny you say that. I was going to say, what is realistic for me, and not just from a training standpoint, but from I'm a single mom with 3 kids and I'm going to night school. Like, what does that look like? And I'm looking to lose 30 pounds. What does that realistically look like then for me? Because she's going to walk in and say, or do a show and go, well, I really want to do a bikini show in 5 months. But that's her situation. Is it realistic? Could it be done? Possibly, but we're going to have to sit down and like make sure that that her schedule, her life, her food, her like everything has to be, and she has to know, is that realistic? Because a lot of times they come into this with an expectation of they're going to reach X goal by Y time when their life situation doesn't support it at that moment. Not to say that it won't in the future, but at that time, I think it's very important that people put those realistic expectations, and for them to be open enough to say, I trust you to give me honest feedback and a realistic expectation. So now I know, not that I'm not going to push you as the coach or trainer. I'm still going to push you, but we still need to be realistic that if you're going to night school and you're not getting home till midnight, that's going to affect your sleep. Yes. And you're waking up at 5 a.m. with the baby. Like, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. So that's the question I think a lot of people need to ask, instead of just saying, here's my goal, make it happen, like work magic.
Right.
I'm doing keto because everyone is. I'm like, no, like you don't, that might be terrible for you, right? Or it might be great. I don't know.
Or even the question is, do they really want it? Is it just like an idea that they
like the idea of being in shape,
the idea, but then when it's like, I
have to do HIIT a couple times a week. That's what it's going to take for me to, get that extra little bit of leanness. Well, I don't really want to do that. Well, then you really don't want to be in that.
That goes back to, I guess, the bigger question is why.
Right.
What is your purpose? What is your why? I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. So the book Start With Why is awesome. It's a great read because, again, a lot of people forget, if you don't have a purpose, if your why isn't strong, then good luck.
You'll find excuses for
Good luck doing anything that's even remotely challenging or uncomfortable or out of your routine. Like, chances are you're just going to eat shit and just not do it or make excuses.
And once they answer that question, let's say, okay, it is realistic, it is really something that's important to me and I want to pursue. I think going even deeper than that is you have to let go of the idea that going into this challenge, whatever you want to call it, journey, you're not going to have a balanced life. Everybody wants to balance.
It's not ever going to be perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like letting go of that expectation and just adapting to your situation every day and taking it as it is, and obviously setting them up realistically. But I always give the advice of, don't try to balance everything, because you'll just add stress to everyday stressors that you already have, but be more intentional with what you are doing. So if you're setting time aside to have quality time with your kids, but you're worrying about emails and clients, then you're not really there with your kids. You know what I mean? So it's just get away from the balance thing. You're never going to have things balanced. And when you think you have it, you just lose your shit. But it's just a matter of just being intentional with everything you do.
I don't think we're ever balanced to begin
with.
No. Because if you think back to school, elementary school, high school, whatever, you're in school, 30 hours a week, something like that? Mm-hmm. Then you have homework. So what's that, another 2 hours? And if you're playing sports, what's that?
Right, 3 hours.
So a lot of kids are going to school at 7 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 3, if they don't have any after school activities. So tell me that's balanced. When their school is taking up 80% of all waking hours. That's not balance. So if we're going to sit here and talk about balance, well, maybe kids don't need to go to school all day. There's no such thing.
Right.
There's just figuring out what works best for you.
Right.
Yeah, and a good question too is your goal more important than your preferences? Do you prefer to sleep in? Do you prefer to eat junk food all day? Do you prefer, at some point, if you want to be successful, your goal has to trump something.
Right.
Right? It can't just, it can't be even. I mean, there's different phases too. Doesn't just because something is a priority in your life now doesn't mean it will be 6 months down the road. So I think also giving yourself flexibility with that sometimes it's not forever.
Not an absolute.
Yeah, it's not absolute. It's just a phase, and that's okay. But I think you're at some point ask yourself, is my goal more important than what I prefer right now? My sleep, my whatever it is, like where are you at with that?
Well, it's interesting because you probably go through it with your phases. I know I go through it when I'm in like bodybuilding mode. Is people will go, well, when are you going to do your next show? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know I'm not ready for that right now.
100%.
I know when my mindset is ready to start eating the same foods, prepping everything on Sundays.
Well, it's not just 10 weeks or 12 weeks. It's like months.
It is.
It's like I got to put my life aside for 5 months.
Yeah.
They don't get that.
They don't. They're like, how long have you been prepping for this comp? 6 months, 8 months. They're like, oh, it takes. I'm like, yeah, that's not even that long. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
and if you fall back to powerlifting, there's still a consistency factor that you need to first off be in shape to start training.
Right.
All right. So you might not be there. So that's going to take 8 weeks. And then there has to be some relative consistency for the time that you're trying to peak for. So again, you're talking 5-6 months. It's a big commitment. So now if you're a beginner, you just go.
You can wing it.
But I like what you really said about the realistic expectations, because we all know people can overreach when they're competitors training for a show or a competition. And that's the biggest detrimental thing you can do is you overreach, you can't recover now. Fuck. You're a week behind and it's going to take 2 weeks to get caught back up, because you're not able to recover. Beginners at the very beginning, if they overreach, 'cause they can overreach too and have the same issues where maybe they're benching 45 pounds and they know they can bench 135. Then we're going to go from 45 to 135 in 3 weeks. And maybe they can do it. Maybe they're just deconditioned. It still takes, you got to plan it out, man. It's going to still take 6 weeks because you might be able to get there faster, but it's going to hurt your ability to go from the 135 to 225.
Correct. Yeah.
So you got to just say, look, I'm in terrible fucking shape. It's going to take time. It will come back. It always does. I've been up and down many times.
Well, I was going to say, you've been there. Yeah.
I live this, so yes, it's going to, I purposely do it anymore. It's like, okay, fuck, I'm in terrible shape. I'm not going to train. I'm going to live and relax. And now it's going to take me 8 weeks to get back to where I'm not pathetic with myself. But I don't get that mad anymore. It's just like, okay, shit, I suck. I suck a little less this week, but I still suck. 2 months from now, I'll be breaking records again. It's just, I can't do it now.
Right.
I could try. My old me 20 years ago would do it.
Yeah.
But not anymore. And I see it with beginners a lot. The impatience. Beginners are either, they're either super motivated or they need a kick in the ass. So it's the same thing as the advanced intermediate. Super motivated need to be pulled back down a little bit. You need to back off some. The ones that need a kick in the ass need a kick in the ass. Like, look, this is harder than you thought.
Yeah.
You're going to do it 100%. Or not.
Yep.
So maybe you don't need this goal. Maybe it doesn't fit, like you said.
And then it usually takes them a couple weeks, and then they'll either say, you're right. I do need to put in more effort. I do need to work a little harder at this. You're right. All right, let's do this. Or they go, I'm good. I'm good given 75% effort. And I'll just maintain. I'll ride it out. I'll take it slower. I want to enjoy family vacation. That's okay. Mm-hmm. You just have to know that that's where you are in your life. It's okay.
Right.
Not everybody has to
go 100%. If they stay consistent and they change their mind, now they're still in striking distance.
Exactly.
Where if they drop everything, then it falls way down. They're not in striking distance anymore. So that's a key thing is making sure those goals are on point. Or realistic, not on point, but realistic.
All right.
That's a good topic.
Yessica, this one's for you.
Yeah.
What was it like training with JM or having JM coach your bench press? And what was the biggest technique change after?
That was fucking funny.
I was pissing him off a little bit.
Tell us how you really feel.
Let's
asking questions.
Yeah, I don't mean like in a playful way. I meant just because I was. He has his own method, and I was just challenging him with things that I see in every day and things I've implemented in my own training, and just his reaction. He's like, "No, there's only one way. There is the great way." I think I want to say the biggest takeaway that makes it was eye-opening. So much sense is him putting me in my setup with bench. You know, we always talk about leg drive. I still call it leg drive. We always say, okay, when the bar is descending, keep that leg drive. But then it's like, oh, you can do 90%, but when you're pressing, go 100, 110%. To me, there's still that 10%, 20% instability. And we have to create stability, like, with our form. So you have to, keep that tension. So I think creating that tension 100% the whole entire time, not just, 80% and then 100%. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest takeaway for me with that, because I did that. You can see my leg drive even harder when I press the bar, and I see that in a lot of lifters. They either let it fall in
relax,
or and everything's just internal, and then they just use momentum to kind of press it, when really it's just point A to point B. It's like machine, so training with him was interesting. I had a lot of takeaways, and it made me cognizant of cues, because I kept repeating the same things, and it's kind of being versatile with those things, because not everyone is going to understand what I'm saying. So be able to adapt and interpret things, and that's the biggest thing in communication with coaching with you guys. I mean, feel free to chime in, but it was just interesting how he was coaching, because it was just a different way than I would have. So that kind of opened my eyes with communication.
The one thing that he said that I don't think anybody picked up on, but I did, and I'm like, wow, that's a really good fucking cue, is when he was saying there's no such thing as leg drive and all this other stuff. He made a comment that said, all you're really doing is taking the slack out of your skin. And I thought, holy fuck, that's what you're doing. You're on that bench, then you drive your legs back, and that pulls the slack out of your skin. It doesn't matter how lean you are, your skin still moves. Your skin doesn't get sucked in. Yeah. And that's really what you're doing. So I'm like, fuck, that's a really good cue, because you're trying to teach people, push back into the bench, push down into the bench, back down, whatever it is. Right. Take the slack out of your skin. Right. It's like, oh shit, I can do that. And he actually grabbed his forearm, and I'm like, fuck, that's... And I remembered, I was like, this is really good. I can use this, because it's really one of the hardest things to teach people. Yes. Is getting tight on the bench. It seems so simple, but
it's the most exhausting thing.
It is. I mean, when you do it right, it's terrible. So you're trying to explain this to somebody that hasn't really done it before, and they're like, this can't be right. This really sucks. Awful. I just want to bench. Well, it's kind of what you're doing. Yeah. This isn't a machine press. And you can still do it on the machine press.
Exactly.
Would you agree with him as far as foot placement? Because you obviously...
I think it's very specific to somebody's anatomy. You need to be able to figure out where they can keep stable. Some people... I have two views on this. You want to find what's optimal for the person to be able to keep the tension. Right. Okay, some people want to tuck, some people have to feet forward. I personally think they should be skilled at both if they're a full meet competitor, because you don't know what's going to happen. I've been in 100 meets. You don't know what's going to happen. You can tweak your back a little bit, and then you go and you get into your arch. I've been in meets where I got into my arch, my hamstring just would not stop cramping no matter what. I can't walk off the platform and say, oh no, I'm passing. I put my feet out in front and I'll drive. Yep. So I would do my speed work with feet in front. I would do my max effort work with it tucked, and could go back and forth. Bench didn't really impact my strength one way or another, but deadlift, going sumo, and conventional, I'd train both too. Right. Because again, you don't know you tweak your back on the squat, you're not going to pull conventional. Right. So I didn't want to ever leave a meet or just pull my 405 or whatever. Yeah. I'm not going to do that. I wanted the option to be able to at least try to still get a total. No matter how bad things go, you can still get some kind of PR. So that's my answer, is you should be able to do both. Mm-hmm. But if it should be tucked or feet out, I think depends a lot on the length of somebody's between their knee and their heel. That matters a lot, because if it's really long, then you're going to have a really hard time tucking.
Well, he proved us wrong. Mm-hmm. With his athlete that he brought. She was like 6'1".
Yeah, you got to really, it's going to take time. You can do it.
It's going to take time.
It's going to be really hard, though. It would be really hard. And vice versa. Somebody that's got shorter legs isn't going to be able to put their legs out front. They're just going to friggin' dangle, or they're going to need boxes and all this other stuff. So it all comes down to whatever person's strongest at the
Maybe they're
time.
not strongest at that moment,
Yeah,
and then
go
they
back
can
and forth.
eventually,
For
you know, work built upon that. You know, so
I mean, for many years, I always kept my feet out in front because tucking was trashing my back. And it's like, okay, if I tuck, I'm going to lose 40 pounds on my squat, 40 on my deadlift. To gain what? 20 on my bench? Fuck it. I just keep them out front, lose the 10 or 15 off my bench, but squat 40 pounds more, pull 40 pounds more.
Be a little more fresh.
You got to look at it through a total, you know, the lens of what's my total going to be.
right.
And then it's okay if the bench is going to be a little under what you thought, you know, unless you're doing a bench meet, you know, or you just want to
Right.
bench
Bench
PR,
only.
then you flip it, you
Right.
know, and go that way.
Would you feel more pressure to pull bigger numbers if you didn't tuck your feet?
No, deadlift sucked. I didn't care. I'm the wrong person to ask. Deadlift was just a thing you did before you had to go to dinner.
I think just to be mindful, like, you know, JM obviously has his own method and approach and perspective, and it's kind of what you said. You know, don't just because something works for him and it's done well, you have to kind of just take away
You still
what
find
you
something.
Yeah, you find something, but you know, stay consistent and trust what works for you, and then make those little changes that you think that can improve. Don't change your whole method or
Yeah.
whole approach. You know,
There's always a lot you can learn from a bench specialist
right.
or a deadlift specialist, but you have to keep in mind that they're not total specialists.
Exactly.
So that lens has to be taken into consideration.
Right.
You know, he didn't have to worry about how it was going to impact other things, where it's a huge factor that plays into the whole thing.
Yeah. But that's the biggest thing that clicked for me as far as creating that tension.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would rather have people shorten the distance as much as they possibly
Right.
can. You put a bench shirt on, I don't think there's really much of a choice. You're going to have to do that. That's where I'm going to go first. When that's not failing or that's not working, you got to go some other direction. And it's not worth a 20-minute argument every training session, you know, to be able to find 10 more pounds on a bench. It's like, okay, you're right. Let's just fix this and make it the best we possibly can and go that way. Because if the confidence isn't there and it's not going to be built over a period of time, you're just wasting your time anyhow. Because I could make the argument that if you're more confident with your feet out forward and I can just keep reinforcing that and fixing that technique, just on confidence alone, I'm going to make you stronger.
Right.
Where if you always got that little bit of doubt that's not going to go away because you're not comfortable with that, I can beat that with confidence every time. You see, there's we already established that there's a big mental aspect here that people don't look at.
And
as
to argue
close.
the point for the sake of arguing the point is part of it too. You know, to say that whatever the concept is, tucking the feet, is that's what that should be, is to keep arguing it just to win that sole argument, or to look at the bigger picture and go, well, you're a full meat lifter.
Right.
We need to make sure that you can. I would prefer you to have your feet all the way back and to do all this stuff, but maybe we can adjust it a little bit in order for you to bench 225 in a meet.
I mean, if we want to establish what's right and wrong, then yeah, that's probably right. But sometimes wrong is the best direction to go. So, what's wrong is more fun.
You get bigger traps that way.
All right, Alycia, this one's for you. What experiences as a client and competitor shaped your coaching style?
Wait, me as I compete and also as being a client?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, because I have coaches. So I've always had a coach for all my shows. And I coach people for a living. So, oh, man. So what was the biggest thing? What was it?
What did you learn as being a client that makes you a better coach?
Oh,
Client-
God.
What experience shaped your coaching style?
Oh, 100%. So, first of all, being a client to a coach teaches you, not to say, I don't say you steal from people, but you learn what a multitude of different professionals do for you and how it affected your physique. And you can kind of pick and choose all the things you liked, all the things you didn't like, and I can apply it to my clients or I can apply it to myself in different ways. So having a coach and being a client myself just makes you a fucking better coach and a better athlete because you learn from, so many different people. And now I don't coach hop at all. When I have a coach, I have him for at least a year, 2 years, to really get the most out of that professional. Because I think the best coaches have the best coaches.
Wait, can you say that again for the people in the back?
The best coaches have the best coaches.
When you have a coach, you have them for
a year, 2 years.
A long
You gotta
period
give
of
them
time.
long
I
enough
think
time
it's
to
important
know.
Oh, absolutely.
for people
At least
to
a year.
realize that coach hopping is.
I've been with Austin for nutrition for 2.5 years.
Exactly.
Like, period. And I had a training coach. I was like, every coach I've had her at least a year, not just a prep, not just 12 weeks. Normally we're matching, but we know. Yeah, you for a long time, and that's how you get better, because there's multiple phases of a competition. It's the off season, it's before the prep, it's all of that. So I like to learn from the best, and then I can kind of figure out what I like and what I don't like, and then you transfer all of that knowledge to your clients, and the longer you have a client, the better they're going to be. Like, my best competitor has been with me for 4 years, and she's a boss. And there's no reason, and there's obvious why. She's been with me for a long time. She never just, okay, I'll be with you next time I want to diet, and took the whole off season off. She would be with me forever. And that's why she's amazing. She's awesome. Her physique is
And you get that
ridiculous.
rapport. You can't get to know someone.
Oh,
in
now
12
we're like
weeks.
besties.
You know what I mean?
Now she does work for me in my business. I'm like, okay, you help me now because so I think from a competition perspective, being a client just made me a better coach, period. Because also too, you're in the client's shoes because you're the client. I have to check in, I have to report back, I have to be accountable. So I know what all my clients are going through, competitor or not, But that's the biggest thing. If you have a coach, granted, if they're great, if they're not, then obviously dip out. But you need to be with a great coach for a long time to see the best results and get optimal results.
It's like a relationship.
Oh, for sure.
People need to realize, it's a give and take. You can't just put the responsibility on the coach. You have a it's a 50-50 thing, give or take. You know what I mean? So I think, because I hear, some of the guys in my gym, well, I didn't get my training template. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I was like, well, did you communicate that to your coach? Or they're like, oh no. And they just kind of expect it. You know what I mean?
They need to take their own accountability
exactly.
as well.
So it's like, okay, well, where's your communication? Oh, well, this is too heavy. We'll communicate that to your, you have to constantly talk and let them know your day-to-day progress. Hey, I didn't sleep well. My recovery is not good. You know what I mean? So it's an investment, and people need to realize that.
I would argue and say 12 weeks out, regardless of what it is, from a strength sport perspective, is the easiest. Because
for sure.
you, as an athlete, you're going to be locked into it. As a client, hopefully they're going to be locked into it, and they're going to be like you said, a robot. They're just going to do this, do that, and it's easy because you got this basic template laid out, and then you just got to regulate based upon what feedback comes through. Off season's a different story because they're not locked in. Their guards down, they're more lax, the compliance is going to be a little bit off, but that's when in physique, that's when they add muscle mass. You can't show what you don't have or what you didn't build, and if they go that whole time and they don't do that, then they might be worse next time they diet down because they're starting with less. Powerlifting, that's when you're supposed to heal, let everything that you broke,
build up your
get back,
weaknesses,
build the weak point, get to the starting gate a little bit better than before. To me, that's the most important. You can have time that's off, but
which is funny because everybody just wants to hire coaches for the 12-week prep.
it's the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
No.
That's really, I would say that's the time you don't even need them.
No,
we don't even
I
take
jump on the
clients.
phone and I'm like, if they never competed before, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need a year. And they're like, a year? I'm like, we're starting your off season now.
Yeah.
You need to have an off season before you can even jump on stage, because competition now is way more competitive than it was, in my opinion, than it was 10 years ago. 100%. So, if someone comes to me, it's not just, okay, in 12 weeks we'll get you ready on stage. No, it's like, okay, we're going to take the next 9 months or whatever it is.
Eat food, build muscle, train hard,
Yeah, I need them for at least a year. That's if you're going to compete for your first show, I need you for at least a year before we even get you on stage.
Yep. For sure.
I'll circle back and close this part of the conversation with saying that people need to be more accountable. Again, the clients, what I see is they're giving too much to the coach, too much responsibility. It's like, fuck it, I don't want to worry about it. I got other stuff to do. I don't want to worry about it. Well, you should be able to figure out how to do this on your own, actually, before you even get a coach, because the coach has got the experience to be able to take you places that you can't typically go. But if they're not in that position where they're trying to take their own accountability, then the excuses are going to be through the roof. They don't understand that they still have to do all of the work,
Right.
and provide the feedback. With shitty feedback, you can't do anything. It's like, you don't know enough to give me the proper feedback. Are you sore? What's that mean?
Right.
Well, there's a lot of levels of soreness, and
Yeah.
so I see that getting kind of worse and worse each year. It's, fuck it, I have this person, they do everything, and then when that person's not around, I don't know what to do. Like you just said, I don't have my template. Really? You don't know what the fuck you're supposed to do on a squat day? Really? You need a fucking template you see what I'm saying? I would smack somebody in the face that said that. I wouldn't. I would jump their ass like I am right now, because you suck as a client then.
Right.
You absolutely suck. Read a fucking article. Do something.
Where would they find an article?
elitefts.
That was very.
But
good
they'll get
timing.
more out of the relationship if they can ask better questions.
And if they ask better questions, they're more prone to be more independent and able to do them on their own, where they don't need the coach and they just need it more for support and guidance. You know what I mean?
That's why we run across a lot of clients, probably more so in powerlifting, but who will say, I tried this template or ebook for a few months, and then I tried this one for a few months, and then I tried this one. And I think that's where, not that those pre-written programs, there's anything bad necessarily about them, but the beauty is in the feedback the client gives, and then the coach can then make those changes and customize it and make it individual. So when we get clients who come to us and say that same thing, where they're like, well, I tried this one, I tried this, none of them seem to work. And it's like, well, I don't think it was the pre-written 12-week template that you tried. There was a lot missing that you probably didn't even know you should be looking for, and that's where a coach comes in.
Right.
It's not me, it's you.
Well, a lot of times the answer is in their own client's mouth. You just need to keep asking them questions, and they tell you exactly what they need to do. It's like, oh, that was easy.
Yep.
All right, this one came in the live stream. Yes. This is, what is the best thing I can do as a coach to my peers, and how do I convince people to try my new ideas?
Convince. Yeah.
Ooh. I don't know.
Can you... wait, one more time?
You shouldn't have to convince
Right, I'm like, why are you
Yeah,
trying to
I was just
convince
gonna say
people?
If they're contacting you, then they're contacting you for a reason.
Should it say peers, meaning more? Do you think that means more clients, or more like my other
like
coaches,
colleagues type of?
I think colleagues is kind of what I took from it.
Who cares? You're not out to impress other coaches. You're out to make the clients
The
better.
best coaches just do. They just do. They don't try to do anything. They don't try to get anybody to trust them. They don't have to convince anything.
Julia's not sending me her programming before she has a client. Like, hey, Alycia, what do you think? Or vice versa.
No, no, they just do. And so when you do, and you... The things that you're doing speak for themselves, you should not have to. And I say it every time, because when we have coaches, and I use these examples like Buddy Morris, and like, none of them are on social media trying to convince, or he's not trying to convince his staff to like, oh, my ideas are better than yours. He's just doing, and they're conversing, and they might be sharing ideas, but it speaks for itself.
I think it's more about consistency. For me,
Well, and I think it's also about the person's confidence level too.
Confidence level, yes, and it's a matter of knowing when to be a student and when to be the teacher and whatnot. But I think, to me, it's delivering every time. That's what I always say. Like, how do you sell yourself? Like, you don't just go out and say, like, buy my product. It's more of it's word of mouth, and it's the experience you give people
And results.
Yeah, and results. Obviously,
That's your product.
And it's how you deliver every single time. And if you're consistent with how you deliver, I think that's... Well,
it's similar to, we could ask Dave, how does Dave have to convince people to buy his equipment?
Yeah. This is probably more in question.
Sometimes you have to sell. Sales
but
is a
generally
part of it.
no, because you've built a culture and a business that generally speaks for itself.
Right.
That concept of... And I think, again, the confidence level of that person, whoever, their confidence has to be enough, not arrogant, but confidence enough to say, I believe in what I'm doing.
Right. It's truthful. You speak your truth and you believe in it.
It should
easy.
Never have to come off as convincing.
Right. It's not salesy if you believe in the product.
I think the overreaching question here is everybody likes respect from their peers.
Mm-hmm.
It feels good. Like, okay, people think I know and you strive for that. As a competitor, you want the respect from your other competitors. If you're in business, you want the respect from other businesses. But the mark of a true professional isn't going to base their work on the respect from their peers. They're going to base their work on the results that they're getting from the people that they're trying to help.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you spend all your time trying to get respect from your peers, you're going to go out of business and you're not going to do your clients or customers or anybody any favors whatsoever. You have to have the laser focus on them and let the peanut gallery do whatever they want to do. And sometimes it takes years to be able to get to that point because it's just chatter. They're not buying from you.
Right.
When's the last time your, peers in the industry purchase from you? They don't. Your customers do.
Right.
So that's where it has to be. You spend all your time trying to make yourself look good, positioning and all this other stuff. And that's part of branding in a way. But it can't be, you still have to have a very good product. I can't sell shitty equipment and expect that it's going to sell well.
Right.
It's just not.
Right. It's like finding your voice too. Like, who are you speaking to? I feel like, and we get in that, I feel like all of us potentially got into that rut at some point where we feel like, we want to speak to our colleagues. Like Dave said, we want to feel like we're in the cool kids club where everyone, whatever, the elitefts cool kids club. But who are we speaking to? Am I speaking to my potential clients? Am I speaking to just finding direction in your voice?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So the person who asked that question clarified a little bit and
Okay.
said he's in high school.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And he respects his weightlifting coach for his degree and all, but he suggested that the student suggested conjugate in opposition to his linear periodization, and the coach won't give in.
If you're in high school, your strength coach knows more than you. Sorry to tell you that. But
Well, there's a lot of bad
I'm going to
strength coaches in high
guarantee
school, though, isn't there?
there's a lot of bad high school strength coaches. I'm not going to say that they're all great, but I will say that they have more experience than the high school kid. I've known enough strength coaches to know
Well, sure,
that's
but
almost
look
always
at
the
you,
case.
though. Didn't you know more than your coach at that time?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes
that was
and
my
no.
experience in high school.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, that's an anomaly.
I'm an outlier to the rule because I trained in a club with people that had 25 years experience
Right.
in the sport of powerlifting. So in
So
that
unless
regard,
he's
yes.
in that situation.
Yeah.
He says he
right?
totals 22.
But I wasn't telling my
I'm
strength.
just
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
I wasn't
Just in
telling.
high
Does he want to join the podcast?
I wasn't telling the football coach how to train their players.
I think even in that situation, even though you may not, awesome that he reads our stuff, awesome that he's kind of following
And
along
asking
with some
questions and
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I think what he needs to learn to do is, we just talked about this earlier in the podcast, is being open-minded to the situation you're in. What can he learn from the linear periodization program that he's currently in? What can he take away from the coach that he currently has, from his teammates? What's going wrong? What's going right? And then in 2 years when he's out of high school, hopefully he's matured enough to go, maybe that wasn't quite so bad. So you still need to make the most of the situation you're in, because as a high school kid on a football team, you unfortunately don't have control of that situation.
Right.
You don't. So make the most of it, learn, ask the questions with the program that you're in, and dive deeper into it. Understand it.
Yeah. I mean, being the outlier, I'll throw this out. I trained linear for 8 years and total elite in 3 different weight classes. So it took a long time before I went to conjugate. Didn't like it even when I went to it. It took a while to be able to move over to that. The other aspect is when you're dealing with strength and conditioning for sports, there's more to it than just how much you lift.
Right.
I could say that that's probably one of the least important qualities. And I would say in this case, the coach might be able to do a little bit better, because if his players are questioning how things are working, then he's not pulling a team together,
Right.
which is the number one goal
Right.
of a strength and conditioning coach. Get the team to work together as a unit. And if you have stragglers that are fading off, and then the number one goal is not being achieved, forget about the strength and conditioning. The kid shouldn't be asking the question in the first place. So that can go back to the coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
All right, that's settled.
He's settled.
Julia, this is for you. What habits or concepts from bodybuilding training have improved your powerlifting the most?
Ooh. I get asked this a lot, and I think when I first started getting into the physique sports competitively, I had a pretty good understanding, obviously, of mechanics and muscles and things like that, but there's a real sense of understanding very particular movement of each muscle because of what you're specifically trying to develop, then trying to display that through a pose. Doing a lat pull down now is more than just doing a lat pull down just to move weight. So the tricky part for me, and this is my opinion, is when I went from powerlifting to bodybuilding, then there was more of that focus on, right, mind-muscle connection and actually contracting what was supposed to be contracting and not just moving a bunch of weight like a powerlifter, right? Don't just move weight, now we're contracting. The hard part, honestly, for me was going back to then being a powerlifter. Not that those new things in bodybuilding didn't serve me, but I believe at some point I went back to powerlifting and then my mind was still partially in bodybuilding to where I was using lighter weight to feel muscle, but then I got to a point to where I was still using lighter weight to feel muscle where I needed to push a little more. I needed to sometimes maybe use a little body language on a movement, on a bent over row, and not be so strict with it.
Right.
I had to just move more weight again. So that transition back and forth to me was tough. It was harder almost going from bodybuilding back to powerlifting because my bodybuilding brain was like, no, contract the muscle nice and slow. And it's like the powerlifter's like, no, you just need to move. You just need to move more weight. So that concept for me took...
I get that. The other day, because I still use the template you sent me
Oh, yeah,
on my
yeah,
off season.
yeah.
Because I usually, after meets, I take like a month maybe like just to do bodybuilding based training, and it's like focusing on the contraction. I was doing a glute bridge and I could not feel my glute squeeze. And it's like simple things like that you don't realize. And it's like we talk about the things that we don't really do when we're powerlifting. You know what I mean? So it's like by like, you know, and this is where you measure. It's like by the 7th rep, now I started to feel my glute. It's like, how can you start in the first rep, you know? So it's
Right.
like simple things like that. I find the transition's really hard. I totally get that for sure.
If you think of some of the movements you do as a powerlifter, the back end movements, tricep push down, stuff like that. If you train those as you learned as a bodybuilder, those movements are only in the powerlifting program for hypertrophy anyhow.
Exactly.
They're not in there. You're not making your push down stronger isn't going to increase your bench, right? So instead of using 100 pounds on it like you may be with body English and stuff like that, now you can pull it down to 40, 50 pounds, do it stricter, flexing, and train basically to failure, and completely decrease any of the elbow strain that you
I
would
was
have
just going to say, you're using less load and getting
so now
the
you're
same...
just training the muscle but not pounding the joint. Where
Right.
a lot of people pound the joints on the movements that really aren't going to have any correspondence to the main lifts, where they should train them like a bodybuilder. But they have to learn how to do it first. You know, the lats are a big one because you can train lats like a powerlifter, you can train them like a bodybuilder. It's completely different.
I think that's the biggest one would probably be my
It's
back.
hard. It's hard.
Yep.
It's a hard one for people to learn how to feel. Like if they go into bodybuilding, that's the hardest to be able to feel because you're used to pulling. Most people I see trap dominant on any row.
Or
It's
and
like,
then,
oh,
and then
God.
flex,
me.
and then to have to
Oh,
flex.
yeah, for
That's the
sure.
hardest
Yes.
thing for people to try to
Like to
figure
find
out.
your lats.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, and it takes time, and a lot of time. You know, where most powerlifters are never going to be able to establish that. But if they train like a bodybuilder for 3 or 4 months, they establish it, and then not all their lats, because you got to train lats a lot when you're a powerlifter, sometimes 4 times a week. You don't have to pound it with the heavy shit. Half of that, 3/4 of it, can be trained like a bodybuilder. So that allows you to increase that volume, you know, to be able to bring that up. So I think you really should know both.
Both, absolutely.
If you're going to be a power lifter, you need to take the time to know both
Right.
in some regard. It can fuck you up if it's a bench and you're trying to train your pecs for. That can really screw up your powerlifting bench in a big way. And it'll take time. Squats are another one. If you're squatting to try to build your quads and you're flexing, and, you know, that is not a powerlifting squat.
No.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, trying to go back then to powerlifting took me a couple months to find grooves back in the main lifts.
mhm.
Yep.
For Yessica, how has your training changed moving from raw powerlifting to equipped powerlifting?
It's single.
The reason why I transitioned to single ply is to get that overload training in, but it also affected my raw lifting because I was using less hips and I was just trusting the suit more. You know what I mean? So it had, to me, I still can't answer if there's any type of carryover. I really don't know.
Did your training change much though? Like, do you feel like your overall template or your overall how your training was set up was very different, or was it pretty similar?
I feel like I could handle a lot more volume raw than with gear for some reason. With gear,
sure.
I was tired and beat up to the point where I was just like, let me just get in squats and then come
Go
tomorrow
home.
for just my accessories.
Your nervous system is probably just
Oh, for sure.
exploded.
It's just so mentally like frustrating and overbearing with single ply, just because you're just trying to find the groove in everything because you have something that's kind of contradicting, you know, your groove. And so it definitely made me less fit. That's the best way to put it. But I know
Thicker.
No, not thicker. I still weigh thicker than a Snicker. I still weigh the same. Like I still like
Conditioning wise, you mean?
conditioning wise, it just got worse.
Right.
And now that I'm transitioning to strongman, you know what I
No.
mean? It's like I'm like pushing myself now. It's
You need
like
Dave's
When you
puke
get in a
bucket.
squat suit and you do your squat session, like you said, your volume ends up. I don't even want to say volume.
Workload?
Yes,
Workload.
your workload ends up being so that you get done, and like you said, you're done, and then the next day you come in and you're like, "Ugh, I'm smoked from yesterday. I'm just going to do a couple sets of glute hams, a couple sets of abs, and I'm
I'm
going
done.
home."
Yeah. And then I also feel like in the end of the day, I didn't do much. It's like, what did I do? Am I doing enough to get to the end point? So,
But you feel so broken.
but I feel so beat up. And so I still haven't figured it out. I did my own programming while still having that conversation with other single ply, multi-ply coaches and whatnot. But I think the next time I transition back to single ply, which I am going to do a single ply meet, I'm going to actually have a coach help me because I don't think I did it right. You know, I mean, my first meet was successful. It was my
For
first
sure.
meet, you know? So building off of that was a lot harder than I anticipated, for sure. So...
It takes less work than you think, but the less work is actually more.
Exactly.
Because,
And how do you handle that? You know, I like to, you know.
Got to start sooner.
Yeah.
You got to accumulate, you know,
Mm-hmm.
over time.
So,
All right. Alycia, this is for you. What separates you from other online coaches, and what is unique about you that makes people want your services?
Good question. It depends on what you need as a person. So my biggest strength in coaching is my honesty and being blunt and being to the point. I don't think there's any magic in an online coach other than the fact of what you need as the client. Like, do you need more of the cheerleader? Do you need more of a kick in the ass? If you're that, then I might be for you, you know? So it really depends on what you need. First and foremost, I think that's what separates me. I'm more of the, I would say hardcore lens. That's not what it is, but I look at your feedback and I don't like bullshit. I don't like excuses. I don't like, I don't sugarcoat anything. And to me, that leads to success. And a lot of people, if that coaching style works for you, I've just found I have empathy absolutely in certain situations, but I've just found, and I've had to end certain client relationships if I just know that they're not putting out their effort. Like, you have to meet me 50-50. You know, if you're only meeting me 20%, I am not coming 80% for you. You know, it has to be on you. There has to be accountability and ownership. And if I don't get that, then I have all these clients who are giving me that, and I want to support them, you know, and be their rock. So I feel like accountability, you just have to come into it knowing that you're going to fucking work. And if you do that, then we're good. You know, I don't care if you slip up here and there. I don't care if you have a bad day. But if you're honest with me and you want to move forward and you want to, you know, keep going and you actually show effort,
and you don't make excuses.
You don't make
about
excuses.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. But, you know, you have to have those difficult conversations sometimes because a client sometimes thinks that that's what they want. And then they get that and they're like, ooh, this makes me really convicted and uncomfortable. And I might not be your jam. And I'm okay with that. You know, because I want what's best for you. And honestly, most of the time, what's best for someone is not to tell them what they're doing is okay. It's usually telling them that the habits that
they have to change.
You have to break it. So it's, you know, I even say in my email when they initially sign up, it says a list of expectations. This is what I expect from you, and this is what you can expect from me. And one of the bullet points of what you can expect from me is I will not condone bad habits. If I notice that you're doing stupid shit, I'm going to call it out. And it's not to hurt your feelings. It's to do what you're paying me to do. So that, I think, is most of my clients could probably say. I'm going to get texts after this.
So is that conversation more like when they say the excuse, is it having that honest feedback to where they're like owning?
Yeah, it's ownership.
Yeah, it's ownership.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, you can make a mistake, but if you're not owning it, I can tell, you know, I can tell if you're taking ownership or not. And by ownership means they do it and then they don't do it again. Like, if I can see continuous every single week, it's the same thing. Well, you're clearly, even if you're saying it to me in an email, you're not owning it and fixing it. So there's something going on, you know, and how can we navigate that? But at the same time, you know, I can only lead a horse to water. I cannot make you drink. So you have to, at some point, go back to your why. Why do you want this? I can't give you a why. You have to figure that out yourself, and we can talk about it. But at the end of the day, you have to want this for a singular purpose, and it has to be strong.
Well, we say, Christian and I say sometimes to our clients is, we can't want this more than you.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
I can't want this more
Yes.
than you. If you want to lose weight or you want to do a show or I can't want it more than you, because now I'm doing the 80 and you think you're sitting doing the 20. And when you make a mistake, well, I'm not losing weight because you keep doing the same thing over. I can't want it more than you. You have to want it, hopefully just as much, because that's ultimately our job. We want our clients to succeed.
Right. And it's funny, a friend of mine actually posted on her Instagram, someone asked her what was the hardest part of her job. And she said, making sure, like helping adults be accountable for their actions. Like, you know, and that's what it is. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's on you, you know, and you have to take responsibility for that. And I feel like that's a big piece of coaching, is helping them realize what they need to take responsibility for and what they need to be easy on themselves for. You know, it's a balance, but at the same time, I just feel like for me, that's what I harp on a lot. Like, I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to tell you if you're fucking your shit up and if you need to fix things. Because if I'm not telling you that, then I'm just taking your money and running. Right. You know, people don't realize that. Like, they think I'm not being an asshole. I'm actually being very nice because I am not here to steal your money. I actually let a client go a week ago because she constantly just was making excuses. And I'm like, I'm not the coach for you. I just feel it. You're not seeing progress because our relationship just for some reason is not jiving. You're not taking accountability. You're making excuses. I feel like this person might be a better option for you. I'm just not that coach for you, because I'm going to be honest. Like, if I'm not helping you, if I feel like there's a battle, then I want you to find help somewhere else. You know, I'm not here to take your money. If I'm feeling convicted, like I feel like I'm just taking your money and you're not listening, then I don't want you to do that. I want you to go somewhere else, you know? So
I think there's other things that separate you guys, that you've been too far removed from training people in person to be able to see what I'm going to say. But she's got 65 years of experience training people
gosh. Are you
in
serious?
real life, right?
I was going to challenge
62,
this.
72, 82, 92, 22, 50 years.
I know.
Experience. But anyhow, because you've spent so many years training people face to face, and you spent so many years training people face to face, that you see the patterns that develop. So when you remove all those nonverbal things that you typically see, so online all those are gone. You're not seeing how they walk in. You're not seeing voice, tone of voice. You're not seeing all those things that were clues. Where think of it as A, B, C, and D, right? So as an online trainer, all you get to see is D. You don't see A, B, C. But people have patterns, right? So you may see something in that D that corresponds to what you saw for 5, 10 years with that A, B, and C. You're like, oh, that's this, right? So you can come to a faster conclusion because the behaviors that they're eliciting or things that they'll say, it goes back into your brain of, oh shit, this is the same thing all these people said, and it was this that was the correction. Where if you just went off what they said, it may not be the right correction. But what they said is the impact of the A, B, and C.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Right.
So when you remove those, I think somebody that is only training online and only has experience training online,
Oh, terrible.
Oh, yeah.
You have
I don't
to do
think
in person.
they have that because they're going to jump to that D conclusion without looking at those base factors of the A, B, and C. And sometimes it will work. I mean, beginners are going to make progress no matter what they do. So that's the
It might work
detriment.
at first, yeah.
Yeah, that's the detriment of the online coach and the stigma. That's why they have such a bad name, because anybody can get a beginner to progress, guaranteed. So they, but it's short served, and those people don't last very long. So that's huge, and the further that you get away, you're still training people in person.
Yeah, I do both.
You might have a couple here and there, but that's that's a huge thing that I don't think people, when you first start, like if you go back to when you first start online training, because you're kind of doing both, and now you're moving further away, you're starting, because it's automatic.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I could not online train if I didn't do in person, or at least
Yeah.
I could, but I wouldn't do nearly as good of a job. Because you have to do in person to be a good online coach. You have to, in my opinion. I don't know. I've never met anyone who did online coaching without doing in person that was actually truly a good coach.
A good coach, yeah.
I think it's because of those patterns that you pick up because you've seen so many times before. And it's like, this is bullshit. This isn't what they're really saying.
Well, I think part of it is because online coaches who don't have the in-person think that it's just the training program.
Oh, gosh.
It's just this. Well, if you just do the training program or eat the food, you're good. And it's like you said,
Now
there's
imagine-
A, B, C, and D that goes along with it.
Yeah, now imagine that communication is the biggest factor, right? Because that's essentially what you're saying. Communication is the biggest factor in coaching. And then you're removing nonverbal communication, verbal communication, and it's now just text. All right, so you're already handcuffed to begin with. So you have to rely on what you learned in the past to be able to make sense out of what's going on here. Sometimes it could mean, look, we need to get on the phone.
Exactly.
And not because you need to hear what they're saying, you need to hear how they're saying
Exactly.
it. Because the text is a little fucked up. It's not making sense. Then you're talking to them and they're stuttering. They got these weird pauses. They got all this weird shit. And you're like, okay, everything you wrote was bullshit. But you might, if you didn't have that background, you're going to go just off what they wrote. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah, I know when to pull someone on a phone call versus just looking at an email. Like I read
sure.
it and I'm like, all right, we're going to go ahead and schedule a call because you just need to hear it. I can tell something's funky. But yeah, you can't just look at text all the time. You have to actually get them on the phone.
But I think it's important
see 'em in
too for
person.
them to hear your voice
100
because
yes.
things are so misconstrued via email and text. And if she says something to me like, "You need to get your act together," like depending on the person, they may take that the wrong way. But if she hears her voice to say, "Hey, look, you need to get your act together," and the way that you're saying it comes off now completely different, you've held them in. They're sensing that you still care. They're sensing that you're still with them. You're still supportive, but they just needed the kick in the pants. So it goes the other way too, where I think the client also needs to hear your
voice
voice.
memos are key. I love sending those.
Oh yeah.
When I know I'm like, I'm not going to type this, I'm going to say it. Because again, they need it.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It really does.
So when you tell somebody to eat 10 more grams of protein, they're going to eat 3 more scoops of peanut butter.
Let's not. Let's not even throw that out there.
It's an extra 20 grams of fat.
I know. I'm like doing the math in my head.
But
I'm
it's
like,
the protein, they hit the protein.
no.
So you see what I'm
No.
saying?
Yeah, no, I had a client one time. I don't even know. It was like randomly, some nights a week when she was super busy, she would grab like I don't know, and it was like an all beef hot dog or something like that. It was whatever. But
Hot dogs are good.
But here's the thing. So
I had one time in my life. Sorry.
she was looking at she was like, oh, it's got 8 grams of protein. So if I have 2, that's 16 grams of protein. Oh, no. Like literally one time I was having lunch with her. She lives far away, but we were together and we were talking about it. And she was like, but she's like, wait, you mean I have to count the fat content in that too? And I was like, yes. She was like it was total light bulb moment to be
Was
like,
it complete protein and
shoot.
complete protein?
So close.
Yeah.
So close, but a miss.
It's meat.
All right, here's another one from the live stream. Dave, you've answered this probably 40 times, but what would your advice be for a first-time powerlifting meet? So, Alycia, you can answer that for stage ready.
Oh, do we do the powerlifting ones first?
No, I mean yours is a different perspective. I'm sure that's like.
but we
doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. Okay. First-time competitor. Well, I did write an article series on this, if you want to read it. Go to a show. If you've never competed before, that's my first piece of advice. Other than understanding why you want to do it. That should also be first. So 2 first. But going to a show and actually physically seeing it from start to finish. Because that's the biggest thing. If you sign up for a show and you've never been to a show before, you're going to walk in to the unknown. Like that, you're going to be so nervous and so like just adrenaline as it is. Like you don't need to walk in blind. So first thing is going to a show. Watch it as a spectator and pay attention. Pay attention to what the judges say, what they do on stage, how they walk in and off stage. Just the whole production is so helpful. So then you're not going to your show clueless. That would definitely be something. And do your research. There's a lot of great information out there. There's also a lot of bad information, but elitefts is a great resource for bodybuilding stuff. So do your research and make sure you understand what the hell you're getting into.
I think perception-wise, that plays a role too, because a lot of people will think, "Oh, this is what," and they'll think of what a pro looks like.
Right.
Or a top
Go to an
amateur
amateur
looks
show.
like.
yeah.
Then they go to an amateur show and they're like, "Fuck,
All
I
the
can do
bodybuilders
that."
are 150.
Yeah.
They're not 200, clean close
Yeah.
to 200 pounds. They're skinny. Everyone looks like a dead animal up close. And they
It's definitely doable,
They
though.
only look under the stage. They look, or under the lights. They look good. But then you see
Oh,
them
yeah,
in person. I'm like, oh God! Like they look like a dead person because they're so lean.
And they're pretty close to death, pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah, at
they're
that point,
literally
yeah.
like sunken cheeks. The tan is like crumbling off their skin because it's so dry.
They're looking like the
Yeah, and that's unrealistic because that's
yeah.
not what they're going to see in an amateur show.
Right. So it's just like you just have to go to a show so you know exactly what to expect, because that's the biggest thing is a lot of people don't realize how lean they have to get.
Mm-hmm.
I would say think about how lean you have to get and subtract probably another 10 or 15 pounds to that. And that's how lean you have to get. So I think seeing it in person is really wise. And again, doing your research. And have a coach. If you do a show for the first time, do not wing it by yourself. Some people do. I've seen some folks get away with it and they actually do decent. They're the outliers. They're usually the ones who are they respond really well. Mm-hmm. So I would say play it safe and just hire a coach and just use it as don't set crazy expectations. Just do it like powerlifting. Set your baseline, get it under your belt, and then you can get better and better. But get a coach. Do not do it by yourself.
I'd say with powerlifting along the similar lines of, I guess you could say go to a meet, and I do encourage people who are very, very beginners to go to a meet. A lot of times we have new powerlifters come to us, and they're interested in powerlifting because they already went to a meet. So they saw a significant other lift or their friends or something. So somehow they're already interested in it. I think one of the common things that we see in powerlifting is trying to make weight classes for their first meet. That one's pretty common, so don't worry about a weight class. Just go. You're not setting a record. You're not there's nothing major for you to be concerned about. What you weigh is the last thing. You should be able to get through all 3 of your lifts, all 9 of your lifts, without any problem. And then I guess to go along with that would be and we mentioned this earlier, is your attempts. And your first attempts should be something you can do on a bad day, in your sleep, when you're sick and you have a cold and you didn't eat breakfast. Like, that's what your first attempt should be. I've been to so many meets where a new lifter bombs out in the last meet we went to, a lifter bombed out in the deadlift.
Oh no.
Yeah, and it was rough, but she learned.
Yeah.
But you never want to experience that as a first time. So I would say those are probably the two things we run into most often with new powerlifters. Yeah. So
I want to say those are all mistakes I did as a first-time powerlifter. I didn't bring support. I worried about my...
You went by yourself?
I went by myself on my first meet because I flew in. Everybody I knew was in Miami, and I just started getting connections here in Ohio. You know what I mean? So I didn't have the support. I didn't know what I was doing. Bombed out because I overestimated, and then... I think that was it. And I also was concerned about weight classes, but that by that time, my mind shifted and I went to one of Goggins' meets and I didn't compete at 132 or 140. I was just like 139.
Whatever.
And it's like no red lights or flashlights like go off that you don't make weight. You just weigh in and then you lift.
Nobody should cut weight for their first meet.
No, ever.
Nobody's ever going to convince me that's a good idea.
No.
Just not.
No.
So just because there are numbers doesn't mean that's like, like a end all be all.
Right.
You know
and
what
to
I
go
mean?
along with the numbers thing, I mean, obviously, Alycia said, if you have somebody, a teammate or a coach to help you, that makes a big difference to walk you through that. But the numbers thing in the attempts is new lifters go, well, I squatted 315 in the gym. That's what I did that in the gym. So that's what I can do on meet day. And I benched this and I deadlifted this in the gym. You did those lifts possibly in a great environment, in a controlled environment.
Something you're used to.
And on separate days.
Yes.
And you weren't nervous.
Take into consideration nerves, anxiety, and the fact that you are now doing all three lifts on the same day. Your deadlift, I promise you, is not going to be as good as you thought it was. It's not going to. You're going to be trashed. It's a long day, 9 hours later, and you're deadlifting. Like, new lifters don't realize that they take their best numbers that they've ever done in that last training cycle, and that's what they expect to hit. And it's rare that actually happens.
And it's usually a percentage of it. I learned that from doing programming. It's like, oh, well, my best is, 330. Let's base it off. Well, no, that was a really ideal situation, great day. And that's just not realistic because to have a 9 for 9 successful meet is like far and
they're all PRs and
exactly. You know what I mean? So it's like take 80%, 85% of that, and maybe that's your starting point from there, and work and build upon that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely another mistake to go off of, like that people do.
The interesting thing to me is some of the best lifters are going to get 7 to 14% more in a meet than they ever get in the gym.
Yeah.
But some of the best amateurs do 7 to 14% more in the gym than they ever do in a meet. So the correlation's kind of staggering. It's like, well, maybe you're not doing it because you train too heavy, in the meet. So that's why you're not getting the carryover, because you're training too much or too heavy in the gym.
For sure.
You need to save it for the meet, but you got to have the confidence to be able to do it.
Another one is, let me test what I should do right before the meet. I
want to make sure I can do it.
I want to make sure I can do it a week before.
No, do it on that day. That's what you're doing it for.
Well, we all know the same person I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to mention the name, but Bob Young's handled this person once in a meet, and he fucking called me from the meet, and he said, "What the fuck? Why are they taking their opener 3 times in the warm-up room?" I'm like,
no.
Tell them they're stupid.
People still do it. I'm sure you've seen it. People take heavier stuff just to make sure. Well, that's my second attempt. I just want to make sure I can get my second attempt.
So the warm-up feels lighter.
Right, exactly.
So they'll take more in the more in the warm-up room, so the opener feels lighter on the platform.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Okay. Let me know how that works for you.
Never worked.
This is one I just actually thought of. I'm curious. What do you guys do if there's a big injury at a meet and you have a longer break than you expected to have?
That's happened to me.
What do you do in that time frame?
Be thankful you got a fucking break.
Yeah, but couldn't
Take a nap.
that possibly screw that up for you?
It can, but it's your perception. You have to flip the perception. You have to be ready. You can control that. You have to be ready for anything. That's something you can control. if it's a bad, I've been in the position several times.
They got to call an
If
ambulance.
it's a bad injury, you just, you got to stay warm. That's it. Like, you can't control what happened to that person, even if they're a friend of yours. You can't do anything about it. The paramedics will take care of that. They'll sort it out. I mean, this is your day to be selfish. So you got to ask you, what do I need to do to be ready if it's going to be later? And you got to remember, between attempts, you already have sometimes 15 to 20 minutes between attempts. So it depends where you are in the flight, too. You may have already exhausted 5-10 minutes. Now, if you already spent that 15 minutes and then you got to wait another 15 minutes, it really physically is not going to be any different. Mentally, it can be really different.
Together, yeah.
Well, we went to the XPCs one time, and there was like a 45-minute break. The guy tore his quad.
Well, that shouldn't. I mean, the quad tear can happen, but it shouldn't take that
45
long.
minutes. Yeah.
They need to roll. This is going to sound bad. They need to roll them the fuck off the platform so that we can keep going.
Yeah.
And whoever's on the platform is going to be fine with them being rolled off, because odds are they've been in the same position before. And but it's more of a mental obstacle than anything else, because everybody's been warmed up. I use everybody very improperly, but if you in the sport long enough, you've been in situations where you've been warmed up. You're supposed to start 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Then they start an hour fucking later.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't go back and warm up again. You just stay warm, just deal with it. Sometimes I really question if the warm-ups are even fucking necessary. Think about it, because if you're taking 45 minutes, if you're in high school, that's like a whole class. You know what I'm saying? So you go to weight training class, then you go back to biology, and then you go back to take your last attempt.
That's funny.
That's a little fucked up, right? But that's basically the same time period. So do you even need to warm up? Or is it just mental gymnastics to be able to make sure you're ready? I don't know.
I think it's both.
I don't know. So
all the new lifters are now gonna not warm up at their next meet.
I
heard it on the podcast.
I'm just gonna go straight and do my first attempt.
I've always competed in gear because that's all we have.
Right.
So there is a function of the gear that it's compressing, it's storing body heat. So you're gonna raw is a different animal. So if you're 100% raw, then you're gonna have to do something if it's very long to keep the body heat up. I don't know if you need to do more warm ups. It could just be a heating blanket, pads, something to be able to keep the body temperature at a warmed up level. Definitely don't want to get cold.
No, right. Yeah,
It's just being able to. I think it's mostly mental in my experience, because not only do you have injuries, but you have people that bomb out, so you have less people in your flight. You got to think about that.
That happens too.
So you have to think of, did something happen with the equipment that is broken? They have to replace it and fight. Like anything could happen in any situation. So you just have to be ready for the unexpected, just regardless.
For sure.
So.
We used to fuck each other up when we were training, because if I got too psyched many times, and other people I trained with would get too psyched, and if somebody was getting too psyched for whatever they're supposed to do, we would disrupt it, purposely say, stop, fucking plate's not, it's misloaded, just to throw them off track. A lot of it was just trying to fuck with the person, and the weights were fine. We just take the weight off, put it back on, but it served a purpose, because if you go to a meet and there is a misload, or there's something and you're in your state, then you got to get out of your state and get back in it again, and you've never done it before. You got to be prepared for that.
It actually happened to me at my last meet. It was my last deadlift, and I set up to the bar. I had my feet in sumo, and all of a sudden the head judge goes, hold on a second. He's like, misload, and the kid is on the side, and he's putting whatever, the 5-pounder that needed to be put on. And I didn't move. I took a couple deep breaths. I kept myself centered, and the judge thought that I didn't hear them. He kept saying, hold on. Like he thought I was getting ready to go. And I heard him. I was just not about to break the zone that I was in. I'm like, I'm not going to let this. If I just take a couple more breaths, I'll adjust my feet a few more times. I'll, do what I need to do. And I literally, as soon as that kid took his hands off the bar, I was ready to go.
Yeah. I actually had a misload in one of my meets.
Oh, yeah.
40 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
exactly.
a lot.
So that's, that comes with experience, so a beginner needs to be prepared for that, and hopefully doesn't learn the lesson in a meet, so they know, because it happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe even adding more instead of reiterating things that they constantly hear. I think a huge thing for beginner lifters in their first meet is know where you're placed in your flight. be aware of those things, as far as, have they posted it? Have they posted, bench, where are you? And kind of calculate how far you need to, how many people are in front of you or right in front of you. Mm-hmm. Calculate how many minutes, let's say it's a minute per person, a minute and a half per person to set up. And then calculate that way. So you're warmed enough and more prepared and like just better prepared.
Even if you have a handler, I think you should know.
Yeah, exactly.
Because handlers screw up too.
Yes.
So you should know. You can't just say, okay, they're going to take care of everything.
And if you have your knee wraps, that's another calculation that you have to keep in mind. So there's a lot of factors that go in, and don't overwhelm yourself with that. Just be calm, and it's better to be ready than
That's why it's also helpful to go with somebody who is experienced
Yeah.
that can help you through that.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's a huge thing to think about.
This would be a good one to end on. On the flip side of what the advice for the first powerlifting meet, what is you guys have any advice on staying in the sport as long as you can while remaining competitive?
I told Dave that I think when I last year when we spoke and I bombed out, I was like, I got to do another meet to kind of redeem myself. But he was like, what's your goal in this? And I told him, I was like, honestly, I make slow progress, but it's really the longevity of the sport that I want to be in. I don't want to make huge strides and PRs and then, risk injury and then where I can't even compete anymore, or I just beat myself up so much where it's like there's no enjoyment in the sport anymore. So it's like I take my sweet ass time with everything, you know what I mean? So 5 pounds, I'm good with it, So for me, it's be patient and not expect results so fast, and just keep a steady pace, take it for what that is, and know when to back out as well. Like, you don't have to beat yourself up because your technique is bad and you have weaknesses to work on. It's like that will come together over time. I think that would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, I would say one thing that's helped me was to competing consistently helps, but not over competing. Because a lot of people, they get really amped about, well, I PR'd really well, so I know if I do another meet soon, I'm going to PR again. And maybe by chance they do really well at the second one, then it's like they feel like that they're on a roll now. Whereas we know they're more than likely they're either going to get hurt or burned out. Lifters who want to be in it for a long time have to understand the ebb and flow of training cycles, and taking the time to do some off-season work, to do some, whether that's bodybuilding work, whether that's conditioning work, whether that's, like taking the time away from the bar. I mean, your lifters don't put a bar on their back right away. So taking that time and understanding that is part of the big picture. And at first, people think they're going backwards because they don't have the bar on their back or in their hands. But again, find out what is your end goal. If you want to stay in this for a long time, you have to take care of yourself. You can't constantly be going 100% all the time.
Yep. And to piggyback, same thing with bodybuilding. The biggest thing I tell people, if you want to be in the sport for a while, you need longer off seasons. Like, especially bikini girls. If they're competing 50 times a year, you will last a year and a half.
Not long.
Like, off seasons are huge. You have to take the time to recover. And like you said, training cycles. Off season training for bodybuilding should look different than when you're prepping for a show. And sometimes you'll see these training programs and it looks exactly the same, like all year round. It's like 6 days a week and whatever, glutes 10 days a week, and I don't know. So taking the proper time off and knowing the stage will always be there, because if you push too hard, your hormones, your joints will not always be there. So like, you have to give it time to recover.
So this is a question that drives me absolutely fucking nuts, because what's longevity? I mean, some people are going to say that's high school football. So longevity is 4 years, or is longevity 20, 30 years? Let's define what longevity is.
Well, I was saying it in a competitive manner, so that would.
Well, that makes it even more fucked up to me in the head, because if it's a competitive manner, do you want to be a good competitor or do you want to do it for a long time?
Yeah.
Because you have to decide that. Because if you want to do it for a long time, then you have to be 100% absolutely okay of getting your ass kicked.
I'm just going to say, because
Bottom
generally
line.
those people who have to push that hard
Aren't
will
gonna
not
last
make
long.
it long.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they'll make it 10, 15 years because it's going to take 10 years to get there.
Right.
You know, that's the thing that's fucked up, because if their definition of longevity is 5 years.
5
they
years
don't-
at the top? 5 years where? So
5
now you're
years
talking
total,
about where.
Yeah, it's going to take 5 years to even get close to being there for most people. So that's not longevity. That's paying the dues to be able to get to where you want to be.
Right.
You know, and then after that, what's long? That's what I'm saying. It's a fucked up question, because if it's longevity competing at the highest level, good luck with that. I can't name a single person that's competed at the highest level, national level above, for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And if you do, they're fucking outliers.
Right.
They really don't
Right.
exist. And if they
Right.
do, they're genetically gifted and suited to be able to do it. You know, the ones that do get to that highest level push really, really hard to get there and sacrifice more than everybody else to get there. And if that's a decision that you're okay with doing, then that's what you have to do. If that's a decision that you don't want to do because you want to do it for 20 years, fine. But know what your decision is, and don't bitch about how this person takes more drugs, has better genetics, or this, or this, because they kicked your ass. They kicked your ass because they're willing to push
Right.
harder to get to where they want to go. But, you know, going back to an article Jeff Goller wrote, you know, he's the best for his age now.
Right.
Because he
Yeah.
outlasted everybody. He's 80 fucking
Right.
years old. Right? Good. You know, I'm happy for him. I never thought I was going to make it to 50 years old competing.
Right.
Never part of the mindset. But that's my mindset. My mindset wasn't, I want to compete when I'm 50. Fuck, I didn't even know if I'm going to be alive when I was 50.
Right.
I didn't give a fuck about that. I wanted to compete the best I could while I could. And if it meant shit was going to fall off, fuck it. It was going to fall off. But it wasn't going to be for lack of effort. So when I hear people say longevity, and then at the same time they talk about how they want to be the best they can possibly be. No, you don't. You know, they're too contradictory, because the insinuation there is, I'm not going to push as much as I have to so I can last longer.
True.
But also, too, it depends on why you want to compete. So I feel like people get addicted to competing. Are they really pushing themselves because they want to be the best, or because they have an addiction to be on stage?
Good point.
Or they want to be on the platform and show off? Like,
Because that addiction's not going to get them their best.
for
Right,
sure.
sure.
And that's when they look like shit, because they didn't take the time to build the muscle they needed to have the shape to fit the criteria of the
Right.
division that they're competing in. So I think it like always, it comes back to down to why they're doing it. So
Yeah, you can only, you know, as you move through the stages of bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever, strongman, you can compete a lot when you're a beginner, because you're
Yeah.
going to get the experience, you can recover, you can bounce back. The more skilled you become, you can't compete that much. You can realistically compete 2 times a year, 3 maybe if you have no fucking life whatsoever.
or if the shows are so close together that
Yeah,
you don't
yeah,
have to
yeah,
hold it. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, there's that, and that's a realistic expectation, not on longevity, but on being able to be your best.
Right.
Because don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying you got to go full throttle all the time, because you're
Right.
not going to be worth a shit.
Right.
You're going to get hurt. You're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to respond. But wear and tear is an accumulated
Yep.
factor.
Yes.
You know, so the harder you push, the more consistent you push, obviously you're going to wear out sooner than the person that's going to push and say, you know what, I'm cool for a year or two. And then they compete again. And that's a completely fine option. It's just not the option that's going to get them to a high national
Where they
level
think
or
they
a pro
want to be.
level.
Right.
You know, it's not going to happen. So it's a fucked up question where I always want to know what their definition of longevity
That's
is.
fair.
And what their definition of competing is. Those are two blind words. Like, I want to compete and have longevity. Well, the fuck is compete? With your buddies in the gym? You know, what is it? You know, at what level? Local levels?
Right, right.
Or at the highest level that you can push yourself to? Because one's healthy, one's not. Fact.
Right.
I guess it depends how you define it yourself. I mean, for me, it's maintaining that elite total, or even surpassing it, placing in whatever competition I am, and having a quality meet out of all my meets. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a great goal that, you know, it's going to get fucked up 40 years from now.
Maybe.
Because that's when you're going to have to full throttle it later.
Right.
You know, to be able to get that total
Right.
later on. And as we discussed this before, it's a very viable goal to be able to do that for an extended period. I think Louis did it for 50 fucking years or something crazy like that. And it's ridiculous when you think about it, because most people are falling apart after 25.
I mean, he's falling apart. I wouldn't say he's not falling apart.
No, he's falling apart, but
I mean, he's still falling apart.
made it 5 decades
Yeah,
before
for
things.
sure.
He could still compete. I mean,
For
he's
sure.
falling
Yes,
apart when I was
yes.
training with him.
Yes.
But still found a way to keep pushing through that. So that's kind of my definition of longevity. To be able to do that for 50 years, but people need to understand he was falling apart when he was in his 40s,
30s, yeah,
or
40s,
even early 30s. So,
Anything else, ladies, you want to add?
I would recommend too for like a longevity or just wanting to be your best is get blood work done. I feel like that's overlooked so much. If you don't know what's going on inside, you're going to enter a prep, meat prep and or bodybuilding prep and have no fucking clue how you're going to respond. I think blood work gives you a roadmap, as to what needs to be potentially fixed, what looks great, where you need to work, because it's going to show up. If your blood work isn't taken care of, if you don't know what's going on, it's going to show up eventually in your strength. It's going to show up in your physique. So that's something I feel like needs to be more of a priority. People forget about it, and having a legit professional review it for you, because looking at it yourself, if you don't understand blood work, is a shit show. So having someone actually read it for you, know where your holes are, so then you don't go into a meet prep or a show prep and set yourself up for failure.
That's important. We should kind of stay on that point a little bit more so people actually listen to what's being said. Because if your hormones are off, let's forget about the longevity. Let's just say you want to be the best competitor you can be. If your hormones are off, you're not going to.
You're done.
Right.
You're not even going to become close.
Powerlifting, whatever it is, it's not going to be done. It needs to rebound back. The other thing because blood work's becoming more and more popular and there's more and more labs, people need to understand that a lot of these labs, just because that's what it says on the paper, doesn't necessarily mean the test was good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so it may show your liver enzymes or your iron is way off the charts. I've had it done before where my iron was like 250 and normal like 30 or 40. Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
So then I'll go see the doctor, he'll run the labs and it's 40.
Right.
It's like, well, what the fuck was that? So you can't totally go by what the lab's saying. If something's really off, don't get depressed about it. Don't get upset about it. See your doctor and have them run the labs.
And there's variables too. If you go in dehydrated, like it's going to make you look like you're going to kidney failure.
Yes. Be consistent.
Yeah.
Be consistent.
So I obviously go to Serrano and he does all my stuff. So it's more accurate, but for sure.
There's tons of online things that people will use, and they're cheaper. They're more affordable. That's why they use them, because they can do it and it's confidential. Nobody needs to care about it. But just because it says your hormones are way off whack doesn't necessarily mean that it is. I'm not saying that these labs are quacks, but
also, are you symptomatic? Because some people, their hormones can read at low, but they're not symptomatic at all, versus someone else at that level would be very symptomatic.
Yes.
So it's also really individual.
And you should, as you said, you should have somebody read it that knows what the fuck they're doing.
You can't look at it.
Yes. Some things, if they go, say your hemoglobin's really, really high, there's other variables in the blood that should be high with that.
Right.
So if that's really high and those other variables are low, then maybe that's a false positive. Maybe something went whacked on that. So that's what a lot of people I know will get this done. They'll be, oh my God, my testosterone's 40. I'm like, probably not 40.
And that's also, too, beneficial to have a longevity of blood work, not just one lab, but over the course of years.
Yes.
So that's something I think at least once a year. I like to get mine done now probably every 4 to 6 months. But then you can look, at least from a comparison standpoint, even if the first lab might be off in some capacity, if you get it done by the same group, it should show comparison. So.
And it's another metrics that you have control of now.
Right.
Where before you didn't have control. And the online labs are good. I'm not saying that they're bad, because they can provide those metrics that you can kind of go off of. My concern is when things are really far off, a lot of people, oh my God, I got cancer. You might,
that's when you go to a physician,
but you got to see a doctor.
Yo, look
but
at
they
this.
don't. A lot of people don't.
Right.
They just call their buddies and they're like, what the hell?
No, go to a doctor.
They call somebody else that have blood work. You had blood work done?
Let's compare.
Don't make your own assumption. Gather your data and then show your data to a professional that can read it.
Yeah.
And then they can tell you if the test is shit or not, because they'll be able to look at all the variables and be like, well, this doesn't make sense, so I'm going to run my own labs for you, and then we'll get, something like that.
That's how I personally do it, is I'll have my labs run, and then when I go in to see Serrano, it's like, here's my labs. And if something's whacked, he's going to say, okay, we need to do it.
Right.
Or he'll just bitch at me for the things that I do.
Right.
And kind of go from there. So I think that's super important because it's so easy now.
Oh, it's not that expensive either at all. It's worth it.
I think that's it. Thank you guys, and out. I don't know what else to say. I don't have a close. Yeah.
You need a close.
I don't have an
Just say
opening.
out.
I don't
You
have
don't
a
have
close.
like a line.
I don't have
like
nothing. It's not like, fuck, done.